Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into a story soaked in brine, mystery, and deeply questionable decision-making. Picture a crumbling medieval fishing village perched on the edge of nowhere, where half the population believes in sea monsters and the other half isn't quite sure they don't. You're the village's most committed bachelor fisherman, famous for your wild sea stories and slightly romantic relationship with your rowboat. And this morning you announce you're married to a mermaid, not dating, not courting, full-on, wave-blissed, seaweed ring on your finger married. You probably won't survive this, at least not without being dunked headfirst into a pig trough by your neighbors. But hey, love is love, even if she has gills and questionable hygiene. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're listening from while we talk about mermaid romance and small-town scandal. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts, as most poorly thought-out love stories do, with a storm and a terrible idea. You wake up that morning to the sound of angry gulls, distant waves hurling themselves at the shore, and the unmistakable stench of rotting sea kelp wafting through your window like a love letter from Poseidon himself. You stretch, you yawn, you ignore the creeping sense of doom in your left kneecap, the one that always aches before the sea gets violent. Your boat, bless it, is already looking nervous, but you don't care. You are determined. There are fish that need catching and, more importantly, several rival fishermen who you suspect are getting a little too smug about their mackerel haul. So you do what you always do before a trip, spit over your left shoulder, pat your boat's stern, her name is Mildred, and whisper, "Let's not die today." Yeah, spoiler, that promise lasts about 20 minutes, because the storm doesn't start at ambushes. 1 minute you're chasing a particularly disrespectful cod. The next, you're in the middle of a sea tantrum that would make the gods consider therapy. Waves smack your boat like they're trying to settle a score. The sky goes dark. Your lucky sardine tooth necklace snaps off and flies into the wind, gone forever. And just as you're bracing for the end, you see her, a figure in the water, long hair trailing like kelp, skin pale as moonlight, not drowning, not struggling, just watching you. You blink. She blinks, then she smirks. And you, brain half-flooded with seawater and a lifetime of lonely fishing trips, do the obvious thing. You flirt. "Nice fins," you shout into the wind, doing anything after the apocalypse. She disappears beneath the waves. You laugh, partly because you think you're hallucinating, and partly because, well, what else do you do when you think you've just tried to charm a sea creature? Next thing you know, you're waking up on the shore. Mildred is in splinters. Your trousers are missing a patch in a very compromising location. But you're alive, and beside you, sitting upright and watching the horizon like it owes her money, is the same woman, seaweed in her hair, salt on her lips, absolutely real. You sit up. She doesn't run, doesn't speak, just tilts her head like she's trying to decide whether you're worth the effort. And for some reason, perhaps the lack of oxygen to your brain, you propose, right there, with a bit of driftwood shaped vaguely like a ring. She accepts. Later, the villagers will say it was brain damage, that no woman appeared, that you probably married a particularly affectionate jellyfish. But you remember her eyes green, strange, full of tides. You remember her smile, sharp and not entirely human. And most of all, you remember her humming, low, hypnotic, like the sound waves make in a conch shell pressed too long to your ear. By the time you return to the village limping, soaking wet, holding hands with a woman who smells like crushed oysters, you've already told 6 people you just tied the knot. Your neighbors blink. Your best friend asks if he can touch her tail. You punch him. The blacksmith offers to forge a ceremonial horseshoe. For luck, he says, and maybe to exorcise something, just in case. The priest has an episode. He demands an emergency meeting of the village council, which consists mostly of himself, a goat named Tansy, and the local ale brewer who never wears pants. The question on everyone's mind, is this legal? It's not in the Bible, the priest admits, but neither is not marrying a mermaid. You argue she can recite parts of the Book of Psalms backwards. The priest demands she demonstrate. She hums instead, Rain stops falling mid-hum. Sunlight bursts through the clouds like divine applause. Historians still argue whether this was meteorological coincidence or proof of semi-divine aquatic influence. The villagers, meanwhile, decide it's probably safer to attend the wedding and just keep a polite distance. The ceremony is wet. Your vows are nearly drowned out by the sound of curious eels flapping near the altar. Someone sneezes and blames it on sea magic. A child tries to eat the bouquet, which turns out to be entirely made of coral and regret. But at the end of it, she kisses you, and the waves go calm. That night, in your little cottage, the one with a leaky roof and a suspicious mold problem shaped like Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, you fall asleep with her beside you, her hair still damp, her fingers webbed, maybe. Or maybe you're imagining that the cat refuses to come inside. You dream of tides, of voices beneath the waves, of being watched not by something hungry, but by something curious, something ancient. In the morning, the village will still whisper. Children will peek through your windows. The priest will bless your doorframe twice. But you'll be too busy making seaweed tea and learning how to say I love you in bubbles, because you're not just the village oddball anymore. You're the man who married the sea. The rumors begin before the sun's even had its morning stretch. Word spreads fast in your village, faster than lice on market day and twice as itchy. By dawn, everyone from the goat-herding widow near the cliffs to the boy who only speaks in riddles knows you've married a mermaid. And they all have questions. Does she lay eggs? Can she grant wishes? What happens if she dries out? Is your cat okay? The answers are, respectively, no, probably not. Once she got stuck to a thatched roof for 10 minutes, and absolutely not your cat is deeply offended and now lives on the roof full time. But you're glowing, positively radiant. In a vaguely damp way, you spend your morning walking through the village with the casual swagger of someone who knows they've made history, even if it's the kind that ends up carved into a pub wall next to a drawing of a goat in a hat. Your neighbors, meanwhile, follow you like a flock of skeptical geese. One by one, they trail behind as you stroll to the harbor, where your bride stands quietly ankle-deep in the water, braiding strands of seaweed like it's just another Tuesday. Is she dangerous? Asks old Ralph, who once declared tomatoes were demonic because they're red. You shrug. Only when she sings and the wine sours. That shuts him up. A few braver souls attempt polite conversation. They ask her name. She replies with something that sounds like bubbles and wind chimes. They blink. She smiles. One man swoons. By mid-afternoon, a group of elders has convened in the tavern to discuss your condition. We knew he was odd, says the blacksmith, sipping something suspiciously green. But romantic entanglement with marine life, that's new. They pull out the village's only known medical reference, a 42-page scroll titled, A List of Dangerous Humors and Other Inconveniences. Mermaids are not listed, but under mild madness, someone has scrawled talking to clams. This seems close enough to merit concern. Meanwhile, you and your bride are living the dream if the dream involves a lot of staring contests and a deep inability to agree on how laundry works. She insists on rinsing everything in salt water. Your shirts now smell like regret and low tide. But still, there's harmony. You show her your favorite rock, the one that kind of looks like the bishop's nose. She shows you how to call crabs using a series of clicks and what might be interpretive dance. You tell her about your first fishing trip, when you accidentally harpooned your own sandal. She tells you about the time a dolphin tried to start a religion. And at night, you lie beside her in your lumpy straw mattress, listening to her breath whistle softly through gills that you definitely didn't notice before, and definitely aren't sure how to talk about. It's perfect. Until you remember, your boat's gone. Mildred, sweet, loyal Mildred, reduced to kindling by the storm. A tragedy, alas. A practical problem, since you can't exactly fish from the beach with your bare hands. Well, you can, but it's exhausting and mildly illegal. So the next morning, you set out to find a replacement, not a boat, a net, something manageable, something symbolic. You name it, Greta, after a girl you once fancied who left you for a goat trainer. The net is fine. The goat was better trained. You sling Greta over your shoulder and prepare to make peace with the sea again. Your bride, curiously, refuses to come. She doesn't like that side of the bay, says the boy who speaks in riddles, says it tastes like old lies and seagull spit. You consider this for a moment, then go anyway. Your first solo outing as a married man is strange. You feel watched, not in the normal, "the gulls are plotting to rob me" way. This is deeper, ancient, like the water remembers things you've forgotten, or maybe your bride told the sea to keep an eye on you. Either way, the fish are not cooperating. You mutter threats. You promise sardines a place in heaven. You even try singing one of her eerie songs, which unfortunately lures 3 confused seals and 1 extremely annoyed monk. Back on shore, the village is buzzing again. Not about your fishing, but about a new detail. You've started talking to your net. "I always have," you say honestly. Greta listens better than most people. She doesn't interrupt. She never judges your opinions on herring, but they take it as a sign that you've snapped, or ascended, or both. And then there's the incident. A traveling merchant arrives, a big man with a beard that could house several birds. He's loud, rude, declares himself an expert in waterwomen, starts loudly claiming your bride is a fraud, that she's just a woman from the next village with a fancy wig and a sea cucumber problem. You try to ignore him. Your bride ignores him better, but the crowd listens. Whispers begin. And so, you do what any calm, reasonable man would do. You challenge him to a fish-off. The rules are simple. Whoever catches the most fish by sundown gets the right to say, "I told you so," until the next full moon. The merchant laughs, accepts, produces a fishing pole carved with what might be runes, or just particularly aggressive termites. You've got Greta and optimism. The village gathers. The lines are cast, and the sea, sensing the drama, goes silent, hour by hour. The contest unfolds like a weirdly wet opera. You mutter to Greta. He curses at his pole. Your bride watches from a rock, expression unreadable, her hair full of barnacle clips and mystery. And then, just as the sun kisses the waves, you pull in your final catch, a plump, shimmering fish with scales like polished coins. The merchant hauls in a boot, a very old, very smelly boot. The crowd cheers. Someone faints. A child starts singing the unofficial village anthem, "We believe in love and also fish." The merchant leaves in disgrace. Your wife smiles. And that night, the village tavern declares free drinks for all those who believe in interspecies, affection, and our own nets with names. Historians still argue whether this event marked the official start of your legend or the beginning of the town's long descent into joyful madness. Either way, it's a turning point. You're not just the man who married a mermaid. You're the man who beat a merchant in a fish duel and lived to sing about it. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow gets even weirder. By now, your life has settled into a rhythm. A very strange rhythm. Yes, but a rhythm nonetheless. You wake up each morning with a mouthful of sea air and the inexplicable feeling that something in the cottage has rearranged itself while you were sleeping. One morning, the chairs are upside down. Another, your boots are filled with pebbles sorted by size and shininess. Your wife doesn't confess to anything, but she smiles slightly when you bring it up, an ambiguous, slippery smile, the kind that could mean guilty, playful, or "I was raised in the ocean and your land furniture confuses me." She's adapting well, all things considered. Your neighbors, however, are not. There's a new village rule now. No throwing seaweed at the Mermaid. This had to be implemented after a group of teenagers decided to test whether she was a freshwater liar. She responded by singing at their fishing poles until every catch leapt from their baskets and flopped back into the sea. You, of course, were so proud. The teenagers, less so. Today, you find yourself at the market, bartering for eggs with a man who insists on pretending your wife is invisible. Every time she reaches for something, he jumps a little but says nothing. She, in turn, keeps tapping his fish barrels and rearranging them by shame level. The rotting ones get moved to the top. He's just old-fashioned. You whisper, "He smells like betrayal." She replies, in that dreamy voice of hers that's somehow always damp. Back at home, she started collecting odd things. Glass buttons, rusted horseshoes, one extremely menacing doll's head that you've hidden 3 times, but it keeps coming back. She calls them anchors. When you ask what that means, she says, "They keep me from floating away." You don't push for more, partly because you're charmed, partly because last time you pried, a flock of seabirds dive-bombed your neighbor's laundry line, and everyone knew exactly who was responsible. Still, not everything is peaceful. There's a lingering tension in the air, Villagers have started making signs of the cross when you walk by. One man mutters about the fish witch and refuses to sell you candles anymore. He says wax melts faster near your house now. You're not sure if that's science or superstition, but your windows are always foggy, even on dry days. Then there's the seal. It appears one morning, flopping onto the sand like it owns the place, eyes full of secrets. At first, you think nothing of it. Seals are common, adorable. Even this one is not. It watches you, intently, judgingly, like an ex-lover or an unpaid tax collector. You try to shoo it. It does not move. Your wife comes out, sees the seal, and pauses. The two of them stare at each other. Then, very softly, she hums. The seal snorts, flicks its tail, and leaves. You blink. Friend of yours. An uncle, she says. He doesn't approve. You do not. At that point, ask what that means. But later that night, you write in your journal. Learn if mermaids have family reunions. Invest in protective gear. You are not left alone for long. The next morning, a group of monks arrives from the distant abbey on the hill. 5 men, all smelling of parchment and disapproval. They claim they're here for a routine spiritual inspection, which is monk speak, for we heard you're committing holy nonsense and we've come to judge. They insist on seeing your wife. You offer tea. They decline. They ask her questions, dozens, some theological, some anatomical, some phrased in that, careful, we don't want to burn you, but we're keeping the option open tone. She answers all of them. In Welsh. You don't speak Welsh? Neither do the monks. This infuriates them. She then recites the book of Revelations backward at least. That's what she says it is. One monk faints. Another, desperate to prove she's not divine or worse, semi-divine but sassy, insists on a trial. A trial, you ask, for being what? Married and damp. He doesn't laugh. The village, of course, loves this. You haven't had this much excitement since the mayor's beard caught fire during last year's harvest festival. You still believe that was sabotage. So a trial is set. The charge, improper species alignment, likely enchantment, suspicious hair texture. The defense, you, your wife, and a seagull named Harold, who simply won't leave. The judge is the local baker. He insists on wearing a powdered wig made of flour and regret. The court is held outside, on the docks, because the chapel refused to host the unwashed marine. You make your case with passion. She listens. You say, she laughs at my puns. She warned me about a jellyfish in my boot. What more could a man want? The monks argue she's a distraction from God's work. She cured my niece's hiccups just by looking at her. Someone yells from the crowd. She turned my hiccups into sneezes. Yells another, which is less helpful. Eventually, the judge rules in your favor. Sort of. He decrees that as long as your wife doesn't interfere with tides, taxes, or tavern trivia night, she may remain a resident, but she must be registered as an aquatic anomaly of neutral alignment. You accept this. She accepts this. The monks do not accept this, but they leave anyway, muttering about kelp-based heresy. Historians still argue whether this was the first official legal recognition of a mere creature in domestic partnership. There's no paperwork, just the judge's wig, which later molded and walked away on its own. That night, you and your wife sit by the fire. She hums, you carve a spoon. Harold the seagull perches on the rafters, making oddly supportive cooing sounds. And you realize something? You're happy, not normal happy, not new shirt, sunny day happy, but weird, wonderful, soaked in salt, occasionally inspected by clergy happy, and that's better, because who needs normal when you've got love, laughter, and a suspicious seal uncle? The honeymoon phase with your aquatic wife continues to unfold in ways no bard has ever dared to write into a ballad. You'd think, by now, the village would grow used to your arrangement, and in a way, they have, though not in the warm acceptance way, so much as the quiet avoidance mixed with passive-aggressive bread prices kind. Still, life goes on. Fish need catching, roofs need patching, and your wife, now affectionately referred to in tavern whispers as the kelp queen, seems to be thriving. She's taken a liking to collecting shoes, just the left ones. You've asked why. She says it's an ancient mermaid tradition to keep what's forgotten. You haven't dared to ask what she does with the right ones. Today begins like any other. You wake up to the gentle sound of snoring. Not yours, not hers, but Harold the seagull. now a full-time resident of your rafters. You shoo him with a half-hearted wave and roll out of bed, noticing that once again, your boots have moved, closer to the window this time. They always migrate east. Your wife is already outside, humming to a bucket of minnows. The fish appear to be listening. You stretch, yawn, step into the yard and realize, with a weary sigh, that the neighbors have left another gift on your doorstep, a head of cabbage and a note reading, "For your little sea devil. May it plug her blowhole." The handwriting is familiar. You'd bet good coin. It's the blacksmith's wife. She's always had strong opinions about aquatic seduction. But before you can return fire in the form of a mildly threatening thank you note written in squid ink, something else happens. A visitor arrives. Not just any visitor. A bishop, in full regalia, with a cape, and a hat so tall it could interfere with ship rigging. The bishop is flanked by 3 assistants and a donkey with a sour expression. They've clearly traveled far, judging by the dust and one assistant's extremely vocal sunburn. Their reason for coming? Simple. There are rumors, the bishop says, that you are in possession of a soul-bearing aquatic entity, possibly unbaptized, possibly dangerous, definitely underdressed. You offer him a cup of seaweed tea. He declines. "I have come to test her," he declares. You raise an eyebrow. Test her for humanity, for soulfulness, for theological eligibility. Your wife watches this unfold from the porch, picking sea burrs from her hair and braiding them into what might be a crown or possibly a trap. Does this test involve questions, dunking, or fire? You ask, because we're only consenting to 2 of those. He informs you that his method will be simple. Chess. Yes, chess. Apparently, in a recent papal bulletin, it was declared that the capacity for strategic thinking, logic, and noble defeat are signs of a God-touched soul. It's unclear if this applies to humans only, but the bishop insists. So, a game is arranged. The board is set up in the town square. The villagers gather like it's a public execution, or at least a goat-jumping contest. Someone sells roasted mollusks. Children chant, "Check her mate, check her mate." They don't really understand the game, but they're very enthusiastic. Your wife sits across from the bishop. He prays. She ties her hair back with eel string. The game begins. Now, you've seen your wife do odd things, speak to barnacles, convince a crab to form a conga line, but you've never seen her like this focused. Quiet, almost regal. The bishop opens with a classic move. She responds with one that hasn't been seen since Charlemagne allegedly used it to win a bet. Within 5 moves, the bishop is sweating. Within 10, he's biting his lip. By the 15th, he's praying under his breath in 3 languages. And on the 20th move, she checkmates him with a bishop of her own, carved from driftwood and grinning faintly. The crowd erupts. Someone faints into a barrel of clams. The town bell rings for no reason at all. The bishop, to his credit, does not scream. He merely stares at the board, then at your wife, then at the sea. She has a soul, he says finally, a very clever one. And with that, he blesses the cottage, hands your wife a copy of the Book of Psalms, which she immediately uses as a coaster, and departs with his assistants and grumpy donkey. You beam with pride. Your wife smiles mysteriously, and Harold the seagull poops directly onto the bishop's departing hat. Divine timing, if ever there was one. That night, the village holds a feast in your honor, not out of love. Mind you, mostly out of the vague medieval impulse to celebrate anything weird enough to break the calendar. There's fish stew awkward, fermented turnip ale even more awkward, and a performance by the local bard who tries to rhyme mermaid with praise be made, which earns him a mild slap from your bride and a thunderous cheer from the children. And just when the night seems to be winding down, a new problem arrives. Not a storm, not another bishop. A festival, one you didn't create, but which is now named after you. Apparently, the elders met in secret and decided that the blessing of the sea maiden should become an annual event. There's a parade, a crown made of oyster shells, a ceremonial sardine toss. It's all deeply chaotic. And you, somehow, are to be crowned the codfather. You don't get a choice. Next morning, you're woken by the village bell and the sound of someone practicing ocarina outside your window. You groan. Your wife sighs. Harold squawks, "Codfather," and you begin to suspect your quiet life is gone forever. But then again, it was never really quiet to begin with. Was it? The first annual festival of the Sea Maiden begins with exactly the amount of chaos you'd expect from a village that once mistook a cart full of wet laundry for a Viking invasion. At sunrise, a mob of extremely enthusiastic children arrives at your doorstep, banging together clamshells and demanding that the codfather rise. You are not even entirely sure how they know that term possibly. Harold has been whispering into ears again, but they chant it with the persistence of the truly unsupervised. You emerge, sleep-drunk and wearing a robe you can only pray is closed properly, to find that someone has built a parade float in your honor. It is ambitious. A cart covered in driftwood, scallop shells, and one very confused goose-painted blue. A banner hangs above it. Long may he smell of brine. Your wife, of course, loves it. She's already in her ceremonial garb, which appears to be a net repurposed into a dress, tangled with glass beads, oyster pearls, and a suspiciously smug starfish attached near her shoulder like a brooch. She has a crown made of coral and confidence. The villagers, for the first time in recorded history, seem both dazzled and slightly afraid of her. Your role in the festival is mostly unclear. There is mention of a blessing of the sardines, followed by a ritual fish whispering and something deeply ominous called the eelpocalypse relay. You go along with it, mostly because resisting would require more energy than you currently possess, and also because your wife seems to find the whole affair deeply amusing. Your first duty: sit on your float and wave like royalty. This lasts for 10 minutes until the wheels come off and the goose panics, flapping into the tavern and causing 2 barmaids to faint. You are dumped unceremoniously into a puddle of crab-infested water and declared baptized by brine, which is apparently symbolic. Everyone claps. Then comes the procession of the odd offerings. Villagers line up to present gifts to your wife, as part of the now officially ancient mermaid dowry reversal tradition. You're fairly certain someone invented this on the spot, but the energy is too high to question. The offerings range from sweet to unhinged. A small jar of blessed sand from old Ralph, who claims it once whispered to him in Latin. A handcrafted spoon carved from driftwood by the blacksmith's apprentice. It is so large it could row a boat. A cabbage shaped like a fish. No one knows how. It may be sorcery. A goat. Just a goat, tied with a ribbon. Your wife accepts everything with a gracious nod and a series of dolphin-like clicks that send toddlers into fits of delighted shrieking. Then comes the sardine juggle, a competition with no apparent rules other than don't let the sardines fall and bonus points if you can keep them airborne with only your knees. You are forcibly entered. You do not win. You are, however, loudly celebrated for your passionate flailing. Historians still argue whether this event signaled a cultural renaissance or a collective breakdown, but several scribes in nearby towns begin recording tales of the sea bride and the man who danced with fish. You're basically folklore now. As the sun begins to set and the festival shifts toward the inevitable chaos of unmonitored mead consumption, your wife climbs the rocks by the harbor and begins to sing. Her voice soft, echoing, layered with currents you can't name, washes over the village like fog. People go silent. Even Harold pauses mid-theft of someone's potato scone to listen. It's not just beautiful, it's strange, and heavy with something old, something older than the town, older than boats. When she finishes, no one claps. They just breathe, slowly, like they forgot how for a minute. You reach her side, and she looks at you with a smile that could bend tides. And then she says, "We need to talk about the eel priests." You blink. "Come again. The Order of the Silver Eel," she says, like it's the most obvious thing in the world. "They're coming." You don't know what to focus on more. The sudden shift in tone, the fact that she apparently has deep-sea intelligence networks, or the implication that there are more people who might object to your lifestyle, and these ones are organized, she explains as you both return to the cottage, the festival still raging in the background. "There's a sect," she says, "very old, very dry. They believe that mixing sea and land blood is dangerous, that it invites the great muckening." You want to laugh. You do, but then she pulls something from her pocket, a small, slimy scroll wrapped in fish skin, marked with a crude eel sigil and words that, even at a glance, look threateningly squiggly. "They know about us," she says. "They're sending someone." You sit with this information for a while. Outside, Someone sets a barrel of turnips on fire and declares it an offering. Harold steals a meat pie. Life continues, but you can't quite shake the feeling that your idyllic, slightly fishy domestic bliss is about to get very complicated. You stare at the eel scroll. You stare at your wife. You stare at your favorite chair, which Harold has now claimed as his throne, and you say the only thing that makes sense. Do they bring snacks? She doesn't laugh, but her hand slips into yours, and her fingers smell faintly of salt. Arge, and maybe just maybe destiny. You're not exactly unfamiliar with trouble. In fact, you and Trouble have had a long and mostly embarrassing relationship. You once tried to impress a visiting noble by performing a jig on a wet dock plank. It ended with 3 lost teeth in a fish-slapping contest that got banned by the mayor. So when your wife warns you that ancient, eel-obsessed zealots are on their way to dismantle your unholy matrimony and possibly your cottage, your first reaction is, of course they are. Because what is marriage without a fanatical order of sea-hating extremists? For the next few days, the village hums with rumor. Whispers follow you everywhere. Did you hear the eel monks are coming? What do they even want? I bet it's the fish taxes. It's always the fish taxes. You try to live normally. You trim your beard with a dull oyster. You collect more driftwood to fix the hole Harold made in the roof he fell through while attempting a particularly ambitious seagull nap. You and your wife take long walks along the shore, speaking in low tones about contingency plans. We could move inland, you suggest. She snorts. To what? A bog. I'll dry out and start eating villagers. Only the rude ones. Tempting. Eventually, you both agree. You're staying. This is your home. And if a secret eel cult wants to challenge that, then let them bring their slipperiest. Their arrival is underwhelming. 3 figures appear at dawn, cloaked in damp robes, faces hidden beneath hoods stitched with eel scales. They smell strongly of pickled despair. Their leader introduces himself with a voice like wet parchment. I am Brother Slitharius. You say nothing. Your wife pretends not to yawn. Brother Slitharius begins to explain the order's doctrine, a long, winding tale involving oceanic purity, forbidden unions, and a very confusing metaphor about a sponge that wanted too much. His speech lasts 47 minutes and ends with, so you see, this cannot stand. You blink. Because? My marriage is causing chaos. Precisely. Are there measurable effects? He clears his throat. The eel tides are disturbed. Your wife raises an eyebrow. You've been misreading the signs again, haven't you? Brother Slitharius looks extremely offended. We consulted the mucus omens. The village is not impressed. In fact, they're mildly delighted. The baker starts selling eel-shaped scones. The tavern adds a new drink. The Forbidden Union fermented turnip juice served in a hollowed-out fish skull, garnished with kelp and confusion. The children follow the eel priests around chanting slip and slide, deny the bride, until one of them slips on an actual eel and has to be bandaged with sea lettuce. But the order refuses to leave. They camp near the harbor, chanting nightly, wearing eel hats, and attempting to convert villagers with leaflets printed in soggy ink. One leaflet simply reads, "The sea is watching, and it's disappointed." Your wife, of course, handles it with style. She writes a counter chant in song. It becomes an instant village hit. Oh, slippery monks with slippery minds. Your doctrine leaks and wriggles and binds. Go back to your puddle, your mucus, your gloom. We've no room for cultists. We're out of spare brooms. The eel priests are furious. They demand a public debate on doctrine, on sea spirits, on what constitutes a sacred mollusk. You agree. Only if it's held in the tavern, with ale. Brother Slitharius hesitates. He consults a tiny eel wrapped around his wrist like a damp bracelet, then nods. The debate is held 3 nights later. The tavern is packed. Your wife arrives in full ceremonial garb again this time, with barnacle earrings and a cloak that might be made of octopus. You take your seat beside her, holding your lucky clam, the one shaped like the bishop's hat. The debate is, technically, a disaster. Slitharius attempts logic. He references ancient scrolls. He waves a jar of sacred silt. But halfway through, someone heckles him. Your eel's got stage fright, and the jar slips from his hand and explodes in a puff of damp sand. Then your wife stands. She doesn't speak. She sings, and suddenly the tavern is hushed. She sings of tides, of ancient waters, of the moon's pull and the ocean's ache. She sings of love and storms and how everything worth keeping is always half wild. Her voice isn't pretty, it's haunting. Salt and sorrow and something much older than human. When she finishes, no one claps. They just breathe. Slitharius sits down. He doesn't leave the next day, or the next, but he stops speaking, just watches the sea and mutters to his eel bracelet. Eventually, the eel priests pack up their camp. One leaves behind a small bottle of ink with a note. For your next fish duel, you don't see them again, but their presence lingers, not like a threat, more like a warning that the sea is full of things both beautiful and rigid, and that you, somehow, have chosen the side with the sharpest teeth and the softest heart. That night, you and your wife lie on the roof of your cottage, watching stars melt into waves. Do you think we're cursed? You ask. She shrugs. Probably, but delightfully so. You nod. Harold lands beside you with a bit of someone's shoe. You take it. It's a left. You smile, because here's the truth. Life with a mermaid wife and seagull roommate is weird and wild and possibly sacrilegious, but it's yours. The days that follow the eel priest's departure feel oddly peaceful, like the ocean has let out a long sigh and settled into its favorite chair. The village returns to its usual rhythm gossip, goats in unexpected places, and the occasional cabbage-related emergency. You're still the subject of murmurs, of course, but they've taken on a different tone. Less that man married a fish, more that man married a fish. And now our turnip harvest is the best in a decade. Your wife, it seems, has brought with her a little luck, or at least the perception of it, and in a village like yours, perception is 9/10 of the law. Life resumes. Quiet, strange, deeply salty life. You wake up each morning tangled in sea-scented sheets, with Harold snoring like a wet kettle above your bed, and your wife combing her hair with a fork she insists is a kelp harpoon. You don't argue. You've learned. You've also learned that your wife's sense of fashion follows the lunar calendar. On full moons, she wears shells. On new moons, she wears fog. You tried asking how she wears fog. She kissed your forehead and said, with elegance, this morning, though, something is different. She emerges from the sea as she often does when needing a think, wearing what can only be described as the medieval version of haute couture, a cloak woven from fishing line and ribbon eels, a belt made of polished driftwood charms, and a wreath of starfish around her neck like a choir frozen mid-hymn. Do I look intimidating? She asks. You look like Poseidon's ex-wife out for vengeance. Perfect. You don't ask questions. You just grab your net, Greta, and follow. She leads you to the village green, where the blacksmith is arguing with the mayor about whether the town bell has been ringing spontaneously due to ghosts or loose wiring. You suspect it's Harold. Your wife clears her throat. Everyone turns. I would like, she says, with the calm certainty of someone who has definitely negotiated with sea dragons, to offer some relationship advice. The village, for a moment, does not compute this. Advice, the baker says. From you? Your wife nods. I may be from the sea, but I have observed your land customs. I have opinions. You have never seen a crowd simultaneously intrigued and terrified before. But here it is. She begins. Her voice is calm, musical, and just barely accusatory. If you cannot make eye contact with your partner while they are gutting a fish, you are not ready for love. Stop proposing with stale bread. It is not a symbol. It is just lazy. Do not tell your wife she smells like low tide unless you mean it as a compliment. The villagers listen, slack-jawed. A few take notes. Old Ralph starts weeping quietly. And above all, she says, looking directly at the mayor's assistant, do not hide secrets in crab pots. They are not secure. Crabs gossip. There is a long pause. Then, applause. Slow, awkward, confused. But it grows. By the end of it, your wife has accidentally become the village's unofficial relationship counselor. Couples start showing up at your cottage. They bring gifts, mostly fish-based. They sit cross-legged in your yard and ask things like, what do I do if she prefers trout? And he whistles at squid. Should I be concerned? Your wife answers all with the calm of an ancient sea oracle and the sass of a tavern gossip. Meanwhile, you begin to notice something else. She's changed. Not drastically, not in a dramatic, I've grown legs and ambition kind of way, but subtly. Her skin is warmer. She hums less in her sleep. She asks you about your childhood. She makes jokes, terrible ones, mostly about clams. She is, how do you put this, settling, not becoming less of herself, but more rooted, as if the land is slowly becoming something she belongs to. Of course, this triggers new problems. One morning, she wakes up sneezing, not elegant little sneezes, either apocalyptic ones. Each one causes a burst of wind, a flutter of curtains, and a small rain of dead leaves from nowhere. Harold gets blown off the windowsill and lands in the teapot. You're concerned. She's amused. It's probably a reaction to pollen, she says, or sunlight, or tax policies. But it continues. She starts reacting to land things dust, flour, the idea of shoes with heels. You visit the apothecary, who looks at her, looks at you, and simply hands you a bottle of lavender oil and a jar labeled mystery balm for the unexpectedly human. You're acclimating. You say, one evening, watching her dry her hair with a towel instead of air pressure and sea breeze. She shrugs, a little. The land's in my blood now. I get the appeal. You have spoons and pockets. You could always go back. She looks at you and says, softly, why would I? And just like that, you know, she's choosing this. You, a creaky cottage, a semi-possessed seagull, and a village full of deeply confused but increasingly loyal weirdos. But then just when things feel stable, something very odd happens. A traveling bard arrives. No big deal. Bards come and go. They write songs. They exaggerate things. But this one, he's written a ballad about you. It's called The Scaled Bride and Her Bearded Fool. It is not flattering. Lines include, he wooed her with herring, proposed with a rope. His manners were lacking. His beard smelled of soap. You are outraged. Your wife laughs so hard she nearly coughs up a pearl. The bard insists it's satire, then demands a place to stay. The villagers, out of loyalty or pity, give him the goat shed. But the song spreads. Quickly, children begin humming it. A few act it out. There's now a puppet version. You are, to your horror, becoming folk comedy. Maybe we sue him. You say, with what? She replies, Kelp writes. Instead, she writes a response song, a roast. It includes, he came to mock, he stayed for the stew, got chased by a goose, lost half his shoe. The bard is mortified, but the village eats it up. They demand a dual song versus song, a bard battle. It is scheduled for next week, and you realize, with a certain exhausted joy, that your life is now less quiet cottage by the sea and more musical fish-based satire showdown in the town square. But honestly, you wouldn't trade it for anything. You never meant to become a public figure. Your dream was always simple. Fish, eat, nap, repeat. Maybe mutter romantic things to your net now and then. But now you're the accidental centerpiece of a cultural renaissance. Your face still slightly sunburned, eternally confused as on turnip sacks, fish gutting aprons, and one deeply haunting fresco in the chapel alcove, where you appear to be seducing a dolphin. The monk responsible insists it's symbolic. You suspect he's just never seen a dolphin. And the bard duel, that's happening tonight. The entire village is buzzing. Children have painted their faces with squid ink. Someone constructed a crude stage in front of the tavern using old cider crates and the broken hull of your dearly departed boat. Mildred, a banner flaps overhead. Ballad brawl, Codfather versus Court Slayer. Your wife, ever the sea-chic icon, is preparing for the event by polishing her barnacle earrings and sorting through her collection of legally ambiguous sea treasures. Do you think I should wear the shell crown or the one made of shipwreck brass? She asks, holding both to her head. One says Queen of the Tides. The other says, stolen from a pirate with poor taste. Wear both, you say, make them guess. The bard, meanwhile, has been warming up all day. His name, apparently, is Kevin of Midbottom. No one knows where that is. He's been strumming increasingly dramatic chords outside the bakery, pausing only to demand throat-soothing syrup and mention that he once performed for a minor duke's cousin. He's got range, someone whispers admiringly. You've got Greta, your net, now stretched and restrung with seashells, so she can double as a sort of string instrument. You're not musically talented, more rhythm-adjacent than rhythmic, but you do have passion. And a wife who can harmonize in frequencies that make dogs fall over. The crowd gathers as the sun begins to sink into the horizon, like a herring slipping into stew. The air smells of roasted clams and nervous excitement. You step onto the makeshift stage. Harold perched on your shoulder like a gremlin who's bet heavily on you in a tavern pool. Kevin struts out in a feathered hat that suggests either flamboyant confidence or a head injury. He carries a lute with gold strings and a smug grin. "Let the duel begin," cries the mayor, now slightly tipsy and wearing a cape made of table runners. Kevin starts. His ballad is polished, poetic, and full of little flourishes clearly designed to get the crowd swooning. He rhymes mermaid with star maid, moonlight with doom's bite, and something deeply ambitious involving eviscerate and kiss her fate. The villagers applaud politely. A few throw flower petals. One person faints, though it might have been from the mead. Then it's your turn. You clear your throat. You don't rhyme well. You're not even sure you're singing in the same key twice. But your voice carries something. His doesn't: truth, charm, and a story no one else could tell. You sing of your wife's first smile, crooked and salty, of waking up next to seaweed and love, of being so confused and happy and entirely alive, of sealing your wedding vows with a broken oar and a kiss that tasted like driftwood and eternity. Your wife joins in, humming a low, deep harmony that wraps around your voice like kelp wraps around shipwrecks, soft, firm, impossible to ignore. The crowd goes still. You end with a line that's not clever, not musical but honest. "She came from the tide and stayed for me." Silence. Then applause. Real, thunderous, from the heart applause. Kevin attempts a comeback verse. "It's something about your beard smelling like regret and pickled fish." But no one hears it over the cheering. The duel is over. You've won. Kevin retreats with wounded pride and a chicken leg someone throws at him in either support or protest. That night, the village celebrates harder than ever. A group of young lads perform a dramatic reenactment of your courtship, involving sock puppets and a surprising amount of interpretive dance. The tavern debuts a new drink called the Mermaid's Kiss, which contains exactly 3 ingredients: salt, sea buckthorn, and a mystery. Your wife watches it all with her chin propped on her hand, her expression fond, amused, and just a little feral. And later, when the fire has burned down to embers and the musicians have fallen asleep in their own instruments, she pulls you aside. "There's something else," she says. You brace yourself. "More eel priests." She shakes her head. "No, something deeper." She walks you to the beach. The tide is out. The stars are so bright they look painted. She kneels in the sand and draws a shape, a spiral, like a snail shell, with waves curling inward. "It's almost time," she whispers. "For what?" "For me to choose." You don't speak. You don't need to, because, even before she says it, her time here was never meant to be forever. There was always going to be a reckoning. "I'm becoming less," she says. "Less sea, more land. I can feel it. Every day. I forget something. A song, a current, the taste of deep water silence. It's all going." You reach for her hand. She lets you take it. "If I stay much longer," she says, "I won't be able to go back. I'll be just a woman with strange hair and a tendency to hiss at fishermen. And if you go, I'll forget you." Those words hit harder than any storm. She touches your cheek. "But if I stay, I'll forget me." You sit in silence for a long time. Then you say, "We don't have to decide yet." She nods. "Not yet." But you both know the tide doesn't wait. It only circles, again and again, until it takes what it came for. In the days that follow, the mood shifts. The villagers sense something. They grow quieter around you, offer more fish than usual. Even old Ralph knits your wife a scarf shaped like a sea serpent badly. But sincerely, she continues to help couples, continues to smile. But you catch her, sometimes staring at the horizon with eyes that flicker like waves. One morning, you find her building something, a small boat. But not for her, for you, she says. In case. You don't argue. Instead, you help. Every evening you work together wood, rope, shells. It's oddly romantic. In the, "if I have to leave, let's build you a cool escape craft" kind of way. You name it Little Mildred. When it's done, you both sit inside, sipping seaweed tea, wrapped in Harold's discarded feathers and a sense of quiet understanding. Then comes the dream. You wake up gasping. The sea was calling you, not with words, but with memory. The kind of dream that feels like someone else's wet stone halls. Voices in the dark. A whirlpool in the sky. Your wife watches you, wide-eyed. You felt it too, she says. And you know, the choice is coming faster than either of you thought. The sea is calling her back, not out of cruelty, but necessity. It wants balance. It wants her. And maybe, in some strange way, it wants you too. The morning after the dream, everything smells like change. Not metaphorically, literally. The air has a sharp, copper tang to it, like someone cracked open the sky and let the storm drip through. It's not raining. Not quite. But the clouds overhead are bloated with unspoken weather. You and your wife wake up at the same time, without saying a word. Harold does too, which is concerning, because Harold never wakes up before lunch unless he senses doom or breadcrumbs. The cottage feels tighter. The floorboards creak in ways they didn't yesterday. Your teacup slides off the table. Even though the table is level, a single sea snail has mysteriously appeared in your boot again. You look at your wife. She's already halfway to the shore. You follow. The tide is low. The rocks wet and slick with old secrets. Your wife moves with purpose, hair clinging to her shoulders, eyes locked on the horizon. They're coming, she says. You try not to ask the obvious who, because you've learned by now that when she speaks like that, the answer is either too large or too strange to name. So you just stand beside her and watch the sea, and then you see it. At first, it looks like driftwood, then like seals, then like shapes, dark figures moving through the water, too fast to be swimmers, too deliberate to be waves. There are 7 of them, maybe 8. No splashes, no foam, just motion. Like the ocean itself is shifting organs beneath the skin. Your wife doesn't flinch. They're from the deep court, she says. You pause. We have a court now. She gives you a look. I told you I had family. Yes, but I thought you meant one sarcastic uncle and a haunted clam. I do have a haunted clam, but this is bigger. And it is... The figures rise slowly from the water, revealing themselves in fragments. One has skin like whale leather and eyes full of stars. One wears robes woven from sea fan and something that might be shark teeth. Another is just a shimmer, an absence of light shaped like a woman. And at the front of them all, gliding across the shallows without moving her feet, is the Lady of the Tides. Your wife bows. You try to copy her and nearly sprain a vertebrae. The lady speaks, and it sounds like all the waves you've ever heard. Backwards. Daughter of the drift, she says, addressing your wife. It is time. Your wife's jaw clenches. Not yet. You have tasted long upon the land. I have lived. Your wife says, that's different. There's a pause. The sea glimmers unnaturally. A bird explodes into feathers mid-air. The lady looks at you. Really looks. You feel peeled, sifted, measured. And you, she says, you, land thing. You have altered her. You want to say something profound, something noble. But all that comes out is, we built a boat together. It feels inadequate. The lady tilts her head. The bond is thick, salted, stubborn. You nod. That's me. A third figure steps forward. A man-shaped thing with barnacle eyebrows and a beard like flowing kelp. His voice is slow and soft, like silt being stirred. She must return before the next moonbreak, or she will be trapped. Between what? You ask. States, homes, Silvis? The lady holds out a hand. You may keep your love, for now, but the balance demands weight. The tide that gives must also take. Your wife grips your hand tighter, and then, as silently as they came, the deep court vanishes beneath the sea. No splash, no swirl, just gone. You don't speak for a long time. Finally, your wife says, that was my mother. You blink. The Lady of the Tides is your mother. Technically, she spawned me from coral dreams and starfish whisperings. You nod slowly. Of course, you return to the cottage in silence. But everything feels louder. The ticking of the salt clock on the wall, the flutter of Harold's feathers, the slow drip of seawater from your wife's fingertips, even though she's dry. The villagers notice, too. Not the court, no one else saw them, but the atmosphere. Bread won't rise. The fish market closes early. A chicken lays an egg and then screams. There's tension in the air, a sense of impending something. You and your wife start preparing, not for war, not for escape, but for goodbye. She makes lists of things she wants to remember. The sound of your snore, the feeling of dirt under her toes, the way your hair smells after a storm. You write poems you'll never read aloud. You add finishing touches to little Mildred, tightening ropes, sealing seams. You teach your wife how to tie knots real, useful, land knots, not the slippery spirals her world uses. She teaches you how to hold your breath for 3 minutes and identify currents by taste. It's not enough, but it's all you have. The night before the moonbreak, the village hosts a send-off. They don't call it that, of course. They call it a low-tide potluck, but everyone knows. The bonfire is too big, the drink's too strong, even the goats are subdued. You dance, you drink, you try not to cry. At midnight, your wife sings not one of her usual songs, a new one. It's short, simple. I came from salt. I stayed for hands. I leave with both. No one speaks after. They just hug you. Even Kevin the Bard, who presents you with a scroll titled Regret in G minor. You forgive him. At dawn, you walk with your wife to the edge of the sea. The moon is just starting to dip behind the cliffs, bleeding gold into the water. She turns to you. I want to kiss you, she says, but if I do, I may not be able to leave. You take her hand, then hold me instead. And so you do, for a long time, until the tide begins to pull, and she begins to shimmer. You say nothing. She steps into the surf. It clings to her like memory, like hope. She turns once more. I'll try to remember, she says. You nod. Then she dives, and the sea takes her back. You stand there for hours. Harold perches beside you, unusually quiet. The sun rises. The villagers come and go. No one disturbs you. You are alone, but you are not broken. You walk home. Your boots are filled with sand. Your house smells like her. You sit. You breathe. You begin to write, not to remember, but to preserve. Because one day, someone will ask you why the ocean sings differently now, and you will say, because she taught it a new song. It's strange. What remains? A lock of hair caught in the doorframe, a cracked teacup she never let you throw away, the rhythm of your mornings, still shaped by her presence, even though the sea has reclaimed her. You wake now not to her voice, but to the echo of it, and somehow, that echo is louder than silence. Harold Loyal, brainy, deeply resentful of your emotional arc, has moved back into the rafters full time. He no longer steals socks, just stares moodily into the distance like a feathery widower in mourning. You try talking to him once or twice, but he mostly sighs. The villagers keep their distance at first. They don't know what to say. What can you say to the man who married a mermaid and then lost her to the tide like a particularly sentimental piece of driftwood? But slowly, they return. The baker starts leaving salt rolls on your doorstep. The blacksmith offers to sharpen your fishing hooks for free, though you haven't touched your gear in weeks. Children leave drawings of you and your wife under your window, stick figures holding fins and smiling like nothing ever changed. And then there's the statue. It appears overnight, on the edge of the beach, carved from driftwood and old boat parts. Two figures, one with a net, the other with seaweed for hair reaching toward each other, not quite touching. You don't know who made it. No one claims it, but people start lighting candles there. One day, you catch someone leaving a jar of sardines at its base, like an offering. You sit beside the statue often. Sometimes you talk to it. Sometimes it answers, not in words, in feelings. The kind you can't explain but feel in your chest, like a tide pulling at your ribs. You don't fish anymore, not because you can't, but because it feels different now, like borrowing from a family you've just returned someone to. Instead, you write. It starts as a way to remember. Then, it becomes a way to continue. A scroll, then 2, then 10. Soon, you've filled a chest with pages, stories, songs, diagrams of sea creatures that only she knew existed. You start reading them aloud in the tavern on slow nights. People listen. They cry. They laugh. Someone brings a harp. Kevin the Bard tries to join in with dramatic flourishes until Harold dive-bombs his wine. You don't stop him. And then, one evening, something happens. A knock at your door. You're not expecting anyone. When you open it, there's a child standing there no older than 6, wrapped in a tattered shawl, holding a shell to her ear. She looks up at you and says, "The sea said you would help me." You freeze. The child walks in without waiting for permission and sits on your rug. Harold flutters in, perches beside her, and stares. They seem to understand each other immediately. You are now the third wheel. She tells you her name is Minnow, that her mother lives in the ocean and her father lives in the hills, and she belongs to neither, but dreams of both. You feed her soup. She critiques it. Too landy. And then she sleeps, peacefully, on your old straw mattress. You sit at the foot of the bed for a long time. You don't know what she is, but you know who she is. You start preparing the house again, not for guests for life. You repair the leak in the roof, clean the barnacles from the windowsill. You even build a second chair. Minnow stays. She brings other things with her. 2 odd things. A fish that sings lullabies. A bottle that fills with seawater whenever someone lies. A necklace shaped like the moon's reflection, shifting, uncertain, always beautiful. Where do you get these? You ask. She shrugs. From the places in between. It's a phrase your wife used once. You start to suspect you haven't lost her. Not entirely, just shifted. Minnow never explains where she came from, but she knows things she shouldn't. Ancient words, sea paths, the precise number of barnacles on the mayor's boat, which she recites while staring into her soup. She calls you fish father. You don't correct her. Eventually, the village stops asking questions. Minnow becomes part of things. She helps the baker count clams. She teaches the goats to swim poorly. She starts her own festival. It involves painting rocks and yelling at the moon. You are crowned king of the sideways sandcastle. Your wife would have loved it. On the anniversary of her leaving, you return to the beach alone. You kneel beside the statue, light a candle, leave a shell, and speak. Still writing, you say. Still waiting. Not in the sad way, in the hopeful one. The sea is quiet. Then, a wave crashes farther than it should, and something tumbles up the shore. A package, wrapped in kelp and moon moss. Inside, a new net, strung with pearl. Greta too. You smile. She hasn't forgotten. You return to the cottage. Minnow is there, painting Harold blue. He doesn't protest. You sit down, and you begin your next story. Not about loss, about return. Because sometimes, the tide does bring things back. And sometimes, if you wait long enough, and love deep enough, and hum just the right tune into the night air, the sea hums back. The strange thing about having once been married to a mermaid is that it never really ends. Sure, the wedding's long gone. The ring made from sea glass and a splash of curiosity rests in a carved shell on your shelf. And yes, she dove back into the ocean nearly a year ago. But the thing is, she's still around. In the quiet, in the smell of sea salt on a windless day, in the way the tide pulls a little more eagerly when you walk past. You've moved on or tried. You laugh again. You host soup nights. Minnow insists on calling you fish father, and has built you a ceremonial throne from old lobster crates and one suspiciously resentful crab. Life continues, as it always does, but that doesn't mean it's normal. Nothing is, really, since the festival of the forgotten eel. You didn't invent it. You don't even know who started it. But one morning, you wake up to find the village square covered in hand-painted signs, dried fish on sticks, and Kevin the Bard wearing a cape made entirely of eel skins and shouting things like, "Repent." Was squishy once. You suspect Minnow. She claims innocence, but there's glitter on her face and a distinctly eel-shaped shadow following her around, so you're not entirely convinced. The festival, as it turns out, is meant to commemorate your triumph over the mysterious eel priest order, whom the villagers now believe were banished by the power of love. A mighty net, and possibly garlic. No one's quite sure anymore. There are games, contests, a piñata shaped like Brother Slitherius, and, perhaps most importantly, a new drink called the Scandalous Siren, a fizzy, glowing concoction served in a conch shell that makes you hiccup in ancient Sumerian. But amid the laughter, the dancing, and Minnow's attempt to teach a goat to swim in ceremonial robes, you notice something strange. The sea is rising, not dramatically, not like a wall of doom from a folktale, but steadily, gently, as if the ocean is climbing a ladder made of forgotten promises. You ask the mayor. He squints at the horizon, sips his eel cocktail, and says, "Probably just a tide thing." You ask the blacksmith. He shrugs and suggests tying weights to the village. Finally, you ask Minnow. She's sitting on your roof with Harold, eating pickled turnips and humming something that makes the clouds twitch. She looks at you, and for once, she's serious. She's coming back. Your heart does something very stupid in your chest. You try to play it cool. "You mean," Minnow nods, "mother of the tides." And others. Minnow swings her feet like a child who doesn't quite understand the weight of what she's saying. Old sea, old rules, They're checking on things, making lists, deciding who belongs. Who belongs where? She shrugs. That's the part I don't know yet. It's not exactly comforting, but you've long since accepted that comfort isn't the goal. Understanding, maybe. Acceptance. Love, definitely. But comfort? That's for people who don't marry legends. The sea continues to rise. By the end of the week, the lower docks are gone, swallowed up like old bread and soup. The fishermen adjust, as they always do, building higher ramps, raising boats on stilts, tying themselves to barrels so they don't float away mid-bargain. And then, the song begins. Not a human song, not even one your wife ever hummed. This is deeper, older, a vibration more than a melody, shaking the stones beneath your feet, rattling the bones of the village in their foundations. Minnow sleeps through it. Harold flees to the chapel and confesses to 3 crimes and 1 minor prophecy. You sit on your porch, sipping hot seaweed tea, and listen. It sounds like memory, like the weight of all the moments that brought you here. The storm, the wedding, the fish duel, the statue, every step, every mistake, every laugh. It's all in the song, and when the final note fades into the foam, she arrives, not in a splash or a wave, in silence. One moment, the sea is empty. The next, she's standing there knee-deep in the surf, hair dripping with stars, eyes the color of the deepest trench. Your wife, or something like her, she's changed. No longer just a creature of waves, no longer a woman entirely shaped by the shore. She's something in between now, a bridge between worlds. Her skin glows faintly in the moonlight. Her voice, when she speaks, is both thunder and lullaby. I remembered, she says. You can't breathe. I remembered your hands, the way you talk to nets, the smell of your soup. You try to speak. She walks forward, and I remembered me, the part of me that laughed, the part that learned how to wear fog and love spoons. You finally manage. You came back, not to stay, she says, touching your face. To choose. Minnow appears at your side, holding Harold like a bagpipe. The sea wants to merge, your wife says, to blend the old with the new, to end the separation. You frown. End it how? She hesitates. Then, with a wedding? You blink. We're already married. She smiles. Yes, but now, the sea wants in. You've been proposed to twice in your life. Once on a foggy morning, soaked in seawater, clutching a chunk of driftwood and asking a woman who may or may not have been entirely human if she fancied sharing a life of soup and soggy linens. And now again, by the same woman. Except now she's more than a woman. More than a mermaid, more than anything you have a word for. She stands before you on the edge of the sea, shining faintly in the moonlight, carrying the hush of deep waters in her breath. And she's asking not just you, but the land itself to say yes. The sea wants in, she says. You blink. Into what? Exactly. She takes your hand, and the tide ripples around your feet, like it's listening. Into you, into here, into everything, which is a lot to unpack before breakfast. Minnow, ever helpful, pipes up behind you. I think she means a merging of domains, but also possibly a metaphorical and literal wedding ceremony that rebinds the sea to the land through consensual aquatic union. Probably with snacks. Your wife nods. There will be snacks. That part, at least, is familiar. The rest, less so. Is this a demand? You ask, because I feel like the last time the sea asked for something, we got eel priests and the mayor's beard caught fire. No, she says gently. It's a choice, but one that matters. And it does, because things have changed. The tides are shifting. The seasons no longer behave. The wind hums in scales you've never heard before. And sometimes, when you dream, you wake up with sand in your mouth and songs in your head that don't belong to you. Your wife, your bride of the tide, as Kevin the Bard now insists on calling her in increasingly dramatic retellings, explains it over tea. The sea has always been separate, she says, stirring her cup with a spoon carved from coral. It was safer that way. Cleaner, simpler, but not better. Minnow nods from her perch on the windowsill. Separation breeds superstition. Unity breeds soup. You're not sure that last part holds water. But the sentiment lands. The plan is simple, in the way all ancient sea rituals are simple. A wedding, not just between you and her, between her and the village, between land and sea, between everything that's been apart for too long. And you're the officiant, and also the groom, and also, somehow, the witness. You start preparing immediately. Word spreads, as it always does in a village this small and this aggressively nosy. The blacksmith volunteers to build a ceremonial trident, mostly from leftover horseshoes and aggressive optimism. The baker offers to make salt cakes. The mayor begins working on an official proclamation, but accidentally sets it on fire while attempting to include glitter for gravitas. Minnow forms a committee. It consists of herself, Harold, and 3 mildly enchanted sardines. You begin inviting guests, not just people, creatures, legends, anyone who's been waiting on the edge of 2 worlds for an excuse to step through. You send messages in bottles, whistles on the wind, songs into the surf, and they respond. They arrive one by one, and sometimes all at once. A selkie in sealskin robes, a jellyfish noblewoman floating 3 inches above the ground, a turtle with a monocle. Even Brother Slitherius shows up, now retired from the eel priesthood and deeply into seaweed sculpture. He brings a basket of ornamental kelp and a half-hearted apology. You forgive him immediately. The village becomes something else, a threshold, a meeting place, a border turning into a bridge, and you're in the middle again. But this time, it feels right. The wedding is set for the next full moon. You build an altar, not a stone one, but a boat, an old skiff, painted with stories. Your first meeting, the fish duel, Minnow's first moon howl, Harold's brief attempt at interpretive dance. It floats on the tide, moored with ribboned anchors and quiet hope. Your wife weaves her gown from sea foam and mourning cloaks, moths that only appear during great changes. You wear your old fishing cloak, patched and proud, and a crown of driftwood and dented tin. The night arrives. The moon rises, swollen and golden, casting a path across the sea like a walkway for giants. The villagers gather. The guests of the deep gather. The waves hush. You step onto the altar boat. She meets you there, and you speak, not in poetry, not in rhyme, just truth. I asked you to stay, you say, but you left. I had to. I thought that was the end. So did I. But it wasn't. No. And now, we begin again. You don't kiss, not yet. First, you bind. You take a net, Greta, rewoven and glimmering, and wrap it around your hands. You drop pebbles into a bowl of salt water, each one naming something you give. Your heart, your breath, your past. She adds shells, her voice, her memory, her tide, and then you kiss. The moon flares. The sea answers, and the tide rushes in, not to destroy, to bless, to wash away the borders, to say, this belongs now, this is ours. When the waves pull back, the altar remains. Your feet are soaked, your hearts are full, and the village is changed. The air smells different, sharper, wilder. Children wake up knowing songs they never learned. Plants grow in new directions. Kevin the Bard writes 6 new ballads in a single night and insists on performing all of them. You distract him with pudding. The next morning, everything is the same, and nothing is. Your wife doesn't vanish this time. She walks beside you. Not forever, not always, but now, and that's enough. You sit on your porch with her and Minnow and Harold. You drink tea. You laugh, and somewhere, in the deep places, the sea hums. A lullaby, a promise, a beginning. Let's begin with a truth. After you marry the ocean, even brushing your teeth feels different. There's something in the air now, a shimmer, a hush, a lingering softness at the edges of sound. The village isn't just a place anymore. It's a borderless seam, stitched delicately between worlds. And you live in the hemline, a man in boots, brushing kelp from his windowsill, while time and tide gently argue outside your door. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows something enormous just happened. Of course, being villagers, they immediately distract themselves with something less terrifying, like breakfast. The day after the wedding. That wasn't a wedding, but definitely stirred the fabric of reality. The baker unveils a new pastry, the tide twirl. It's blue, it's salty, it's slightly cursed. You bite into one and experience a memory that isn't yours, sitting at the bottom of the sea beside a clam who insists on debating philosophy. Do you ever regret it? The clam asks. You blink. What? Says Minnow, who's eating her 4th twirl with the delicacy of a raccoon in formal wear. You shake your head. Never mind. Minnow grins, cheeks puffed with pastry. It's starting, isn't it? You know what she means, and you pretend you don't. The convergence, as your wife calls it, does not arrive all at once. It drips, trickles, wobbles. First, the weather. Rain begins to behave oddly. It falls in circles. It taps out lullabies. It skips certain roofs entirely, as if recognizing those who have treated the sea kindly. Then, the animals, fish begin showing up not just at the harbor, but in gardens, in bathtubs, once in the mayor's hat. Minnow begins organizing them into small learning pods. They learn math. They do poorly. Harold is appointed headmaster. He accepts with menace. Then, the dreams. You begin to see things you've never seen. Long corridors of pearl, towers made of salt, a library under the sea, guarded by a seahorse who insists on absolute silence and carries a very small trident. Your wife tells you it's bleed-through memories from the other side finding room to stretch now that the door's been opened. Is it safe? You ask. She shrugs. Safe? No. Beautiful? Also no. But important? Absolutely. You appreciate the honesty. The village council calls a meeting. There are now 13 members, one of whom is a crab. No one remembers voting the crab in, but it wears a tiny sash that says Public Affairs, and it has impeccable attendance. You're asked to give a report on the state of the realms. You draw a diagram involving waves, soupy, and what might be Harold wearing a crown. No one understands it, but it gets a standing ovation. Later, Kevin the Bard corners you and whispers, "Are we going to become sea people now? Like, full-time? Should I start moisturizing differently?" You suggest seaweed masks. He takes this too seriously. That night, the tide brings something new. Not a storm. A village. Floating. Whole. It appears on the horizon at sunset. Dozens of boats lashed together, forming walkways and homes and gardens suspended above the sea. Your wife stands beside you, eyes wide. "They found us," she says. You don't ask who they are. You wait. The floating village docks quietly, like a memory returning. The people who disembark are, like you, sort of landfolk, but not. They wear fishbone jewelry and have eyes like tide pools. Some have scales. One smells like fresh coral. They look at your wife and smile. "You called," says the tallest of them. A woman wrapped in eel silk and driftwood rings. "Not intentionally," your wife replies. "But yes, the newcomers, the between folk. They call themselves set up beside the old docks. They plant strange herbs. They trade stories for bread. One of them repairs the chapel roof, using nothing but barnacles and whispered secrets. It glows at night now. You find yourself walking through the village and thinking, this is not what I imagined when I fell in love with someone who smelled faintly of sardines. But then again, it's exactly what you hoped for when you said yes to her. Again and again and again. There's a feast. Of course there is. The between folk cook things that defy explanation, noodles that hum sea shanties, soup that tells your future yours says, mild inconvenience followed by existential clarity, and something they call memory jam, which makes everyone who eats it cry exactly once, then laugh. You sit beside your wife, watching minnow dance with a glowing squid, and for the first time in weeks, you don't feel like the seam. You feel like the thread. The next day, the world cracks. Not literally, but enough. The veil between sea and land splits open in a way no net can mend. It begins with a child, not Minnow, another one, a boy, maybe 5, who walks into the tavern holding a glowing pebble and says, "The tallywake is coming." Everyone pauses, even Harold. The tallywake is not a word anyone recognizes, except your wife. Her eyes go wide, and for the first time since she returned, she looks afraid. "We have to prepare," she says. "Prepare how?" You ask. "Stories," she whispers. "We need all the stories." And just like that, the race begins. You gather the village elders. You gather the between folk. You gather the crab. You write. You draw. You sing. You remember. Because the tallywake, as it turns out, is a reckoning, a being made of memory, of the sea's collective story. It comes to see if the merging was earned, and it will ask one question, only one, to each person. And if you lie, or forget, or refuse to answer, it will unmake, not punish, not destroy, just gently erase. Your wife organizes the preparations. Minnow creates a songbook titled, "Truths I'm Okay Sharing with an Ocean Ghost." It includes such gems as I stole a spoon once, I kissed a mackerel on a dare, and sometimes I pretend I don't hear Harold to avoid chores. Kevin writes an epic ballad about how he used to exaggerate stories. It is 37 verses long and includes 2 costume changes. You write down everything, not just your story. Everyone's. The lovers who met at the fish market, the smith who talks to iron, the librarian who once dated a ghost. You collect it all. The tallywake arrives on the 3rd night. It doesn't look like anything. It just is a wave, a breath, a hush so loud it trembles. And one by one, it asks. A child steps forward. The tallywake hums, and the child answers, I love the rain because it smells like fish kisses. The tallywake shivers and moves on. A woman steps up. I once buried a love letter under a seashell and hoped it'd find the right tide. Another hum, another pass. It moves through the crowd like a soft breeze, asking, listening, remembering, and then it reaches you. You don't know what it asks, not with words. It just looks, waits. And you say, I fell in love with the sea once. I still haven't surfaced. The tallywake lingers, and then it leaves no judgment, no wrath, just understanding. The veil seals behind it, and the world is quiet again. You hold your wife's hand. Minnow howls at the moon. Harold steals your shoe, and everything feels whole. For the first time, maybe ever. You know you're living in a changed world when your cat starts offering you advice. Not metaphorically, not in the usual, judgmental way. Cats communicate stares and passive aggression. No, this is spoken advice, verbally, in full sentences, delivered at dawn while sitting squarely on your chest. Stop leaving fish in the rain, says the cat, whom Minnow has recently named Whiskers of the Deep, High Judge of Sardine Temples. You blink awake. I didn't know I was. Exactly, says Whiskers, and that's why the sea is offended. Then he disappears into the cupboard, presumably to nap on the cleanest folded towel. That's how the day begins now. Your life, in this new post-tallywake world, is equal parts folklore, food, and absurd diplomacy. The sea doesn't just visit anymore, it lingers. Small waves occasionally crawl up your porch steps to gossip. A seagull delivers unsolicited marriage proposals, one from a lobster with excellent penmanship. You've received gifts from underwater monarchs, a teacup made from compressed pearls, a scroll that hums softly when lonely, and a cloak of translucent kelp that floats even when dry. You wear it while watering your garden. You feel majestic. The between folk expand. Some build floating homes tethered to the docks. Others take to the trees, creating woven hammocks that sway above the tide. A few discover the caves beyond the cliffs and declare them adequately spooky and great for reflection, ritual, and mild pickling. The village adapts with the shrugging, why not, attitude it's always had. New customs appear overnight. Every Tuesday, Minnow leads tide listening sessions. Close your eyes, she says. Now tilt your ears slightly crabwise. The tavern introduces a dish called possibly conscious porridge. It stares back. It's polite. It's wildly popular. Weddings now include at least one splash, 3 bubbles of uncertain origin, and an underwater vow whispered into a shell. You're proud of your people. You're exhausted. You nap more now. Not because you're old, though your knees sometimes disagree, but because your dreams are busy. They've become visits, lessons, echoes. Last night, you dreamed of a whale who spoke in constellations. The night before, a reef that remembered your name. Sometimes, you dream of your wife's laughter before it ever existed in this timeline. Sometimes, she dreams with you. You're not sure how it works. You're afraid to ask. Today, the tide delivers a child. Not a metaphorical child. A literal child floats up in a clamshell cradle, singing quietly to herself. Wrapped in sea silk and holding a spoon, she sits up, sneezes once, and says, I'm late. Minnow is delighted. Finally, she says, my apprentice. You blink. You're 7. Exactly, says Minnow. Prime mentoring age. The child's name is Myrtle. She's 3. She speaks in riddles. She smells like storms. She immediately declares Harold her life coach. Harold accepts this responsibility with a solemn nod and steals her biscuit. Your wife believes Myrtle is a ripple born, one of the first natural results of the merging. A child of both worlds, she says, watching Myrtle enchant a pine cone into reciting lullabies. You begin child-proofing the house, which is difficult when the house refuses. It's become spirited. Some days the walls hum sea shanties. Some days your bed grows seaweed pillows. Once, the cupboard locked itself until you apologized for doubting the sincerity of a sentient sponge. Minnow moves into the roof. Myrtle moves into the kettle cupboard. You and your wife sleep on a floating bed that smells like memories and occasionally sings happy birthday to itself. You think about writing a manual, but instead, you write stories. Tales for Myrtle, tales for Minnow, tales for the villagers, who now gather each week to hear the latest chapter of The Man Who Married the Sea and then had to deal with the laundry. It's wildly popular. Kevin the Bard adapts it into a puppet opera. There are sequin floods. Harold plays himself. You sit in the front row, weeping with laughter and pride. And then, slowly, without meaning to, you begin dreaming forward. You see futures, a market made of coral and linen, where land folk and sea folk trade stories like coins, a school shaped like a giant barnacle, where Minnow teaches spells and soup simultaneously, a lighthouse that doesn't shine light, but sound calling home the wanderers who forgot they were welcome. You wake up with tears, not from sadness, from hope. You begin building again, not boats, not nets, but spaces, places for storytelling, for song, for people caught in between. One is a bench on the beach with a sign, "Sit here to remember someone." Another is a floating library, staffed by fish and curated by Myrtle, who insists on classifying books by taste. Your wife watches you with love so deep it makes the moon blush. "We're building a new tide," she says. "Not we," you reply. "You started it. I'm just rowing along. You're the current," she says. "You moved me." And for the first time in forever, you believe her. But peace never lingers untested. A storm brews, not in the sky. In the past, you receive a letter, old paper, older ink. It's from you, not dream you, not alternate you. You, from years ago, before her. It reads, "If you're reading this, it worked. You opened the tide. You married the sea. But be warned, not all waters are kind. Not all currents forgive. Something followed us home. Watch the mirror." You check your mirror. It smiles back. You do not. Your wife reads the letter and goes quiet. "Something slipped through," she says. You brace. Another crisis, another reckoning, but not like before. This one is personal. This one is about you, because sometimes, when you crack open magic wide enough to kiss, something else peeks in. It begins small. Your reflection lags behind. Then, it doesn't reflect your smile. Then, it moves on its own. Then, it steps out and introduces itself. "I'm you," it says. But the part that said no, you stare. Your wife watches, hand on your shoulder. Minnow arms herself with a ladle. The other you explains. He was the version that stayed afraid, that never reached into the waves, that chose safe and lost wonder. Now, he wants a second chance. "I just want in," he says. And you believe him. But you also know some doors don't swing both ways. You invite him in. For dinner, you talk, he weeps. And at the end of the night, you offer him a bed, not your life, not your wife, just a place. And in the morning, he's gone. But the air feels lighter, the world steadier. You look in the mirror. It looks back and smiles. You're having dinner with a talking spoon when you realize you're no longer afraid of what's impossible. The spoon's name is Jeffrey. Jeffrey was enchanted 3 festivals ago, when Myrtle accidentally cast a spirited utensil spell while trying to butter a biscuit that refused to be subdued. Since then, Jeffrey's become a fixture of the household. His voice is tinny, opinionated, and somehow always knows when you've added too much salt. "Underseasoned," he says tonight, wiggling from the bowl. You sigh. "It's literally seawater stew." "Exactly," he retorts. Your wife stifles a giggle. Minnow throws him into the sink. Evenings like these have become normal. This is your life now. The table sings lullabies if you don't set it properly. Harold has taken up painting and will be furious if you move his supplies. Minnow can now hover when excited. It's unnerving. And Myrtle, it turns out, can read weather by sniffing rocks. "I smell lightning," she says one morning. You check the sky. Perfectly clear. An hour later, it rains sideways, and the mayor's toupee sails off to start a new life somewhere upriver. The between-folk have fully integrated now. The village is no longer landbound. It's something else entirely anchored yet fluid. Stone mixed with salt. Homes that drift and bob. street signs that hum sea chants when the fog rolls in. They bring news. A coral citadel has risen far out to sea, formed by reef thinkers and tidewalkers. You're invited to visit. You politely decline. You prefer your chaos localized. It's Minnow's idea to host a remembrance tide, a celebration of what got us here, she explains, standing on a bucket, Harold perched dramatically on her shoulder. A night to light candles, share stories, and dunk anyone who says it was all fate. You support the idea. The village does too. Preparations begin. The beach is cleared, lanterns strung, tables built from driftwood and laughter. The air buzzes with anticipation and a lot of powdered cinnamon. The baker misunderstood the assignment. Your wife prepares a tide offering a braid of her old seaweed, your old net, and Minnow's first drawing a wildly incorrect interpretation of a fish with legs. Myrtle constructs a puppet theater out of shells. She casts herself as the sea, Minnow as the land, and you as the yelling man with fish breath. You don't argue. The festival begins with song, not rehearsed, not composed, just sung by everyone. Mothers and mages, elders and eel folk. Even the trees seem to hum along. Then come the stories. You go first, not because you want to, but because Myrtle kicks your shin and says, "You're the book." So you stand, you speak, you tell them everything. The storm, the first glimpse, the proposal with a knotted rope, the laughter, the longing, the loss, the return, the wedding, the mirror, the choice. You cry somewhere in there, but it's gentle, like rain remembering how to fall. When you finish, there's silence. Then, applause. Then, bread. That's the order of things now. Later, as the candles flicker and the tide wraps its arms around the sand, you sit beside your wife on a rock that wasn't there yesterday. "I used to think this would end," you whisper. She leans on your shoulder. "It doesn't." "No, I don't think it does." Minnow and Myrtle skip stones. One stone glows, one sings, one grows legs and walks away. Myrtle chases it. Harold supervises from a wine barrel. The sky begins to shimmer, not the stars, the air. You look up, and the sky opens. Just a little, just enough to let through. Them, you know them instantly. The watchers, not gods, not guardians, witnesses, older than tides. You've dreamed of them, once or twice. Whispered hints, flickers in the surf. They descend not like angels, but like questions, soft, bright, vast. They speak not in words, but sensation. You feel it in your teeth, your chest, your ribs. We see you. You stand. So does your wife. Minnow hides behind Myrtle. Myrtle draws a spoon. The watchers do not threaten. They observe. They notice. You are a crack in the system. You are proof that separation is optional, that love bends borders. And now, they are curious. One lowers barely a shimmer, barely a ripple, and holds out something. A seed. Round, clear, beating like a heart. "For the next place," your wife whispers. You take it. It pulses, warm, quiet, real. Then they leave. No storm, no fanfare, just a sky closing gently behind a truth too big to stay. You plant the seed in your garden, beneath the old sardine bush. You don't know what it'll grow into, but already the soil is singing, and the wind feels hopeful. Later, you find an old letter, your own handwriting, from your first week as a fisherman. It says, "If I don't stop now, I'll never be normal." You laugh, you cry, you burn it, and you make soup. Because that's your magic, feeding others, making them stay a little longer. Your wife kisses your cheek. Minnow calls you in to judge a rock ballet. Myrtle is teaching Harold to knit. The spoon hums quietly in a drawer. The moon sighs. The sea thanks you. And you are home. Time passes differently now. Not faster, not slower. Just rounder. Like a tide that forgets it's supposed to leave and returns again and again. Not out of duty, but affection. You live in that rhythm now, somewhere between moon phases and the scent of boiling seaweed. It's been 3 years since the convergence. 2 since Myrtle learned how to teleport short distances by sneezing. 1 since Harold became mayor by technicality. He pecked the charter. No one else ran. And now you all live in a deeply confusing but oddly efficient democracy. You are still the fisherman, though you rarely fish anymore. You tend to nets, to dreams, to the memories that collect like driftwood at your doorstep. People come to you now, not to buy things, not to fix boats, to ask questions. Strange ones. Do dreams leave footprints? What happens if you kiss the moon? Is soup a language? You never have answers, but you do have stories. So you tell them, sometimes under stars, sometimes during breakfast, sometimes with minnow perched on your lap, and myrtle attempting to braid your beard into the shape of a sea serpent. Your wife, she is glorious, more herself than ever. Some days she vanishes beneath the waves. Some days she walks through town in a dress made of clouds. Once, she turned the chapel steps into coral, just because they were a bit drab. You love her more now than you did the day she vanished into the sea, not because she came back, but because she chose to, again and again and again. Each morning, you ask. Each evening, she answers, with laughter, with soup, with salt on her lips. You ask your house, too. It squeaks once for yes, twice for maybe, and thrice when it wants more honey in the tea. You oblige. Life is good, weird, surreal, occasionally narrated by a nearby clam. But good. One evening, a boat arrives, small, worn, carrying a child. Not myrtle, not minnow. A new one, eyes like fresh sea glass, hands clutching a note. It reads, "Dear whoever loves the sea the right way, please look after her." You do, of course you do. She fits in perfectly. Myrtle teaches her how to listen to shadows. Minnow teaches her how to make friends with forks. You teach her how to mend nets and slice onions without crying. She fails spectacularly and proudly. And your wife, she sings to her songs you've never heard, songs no one else ever will. One day, you feel something shift, not in the wind, not in the sea, in you, a stillness, not death, not even ending, just readiness. You go to the beach, alone, sit on the same rock where you once proposed. The tide comes in. It brings a letter, sealed in pearl. You open it. It's blank, but it feels like goodbye. You smile. You write on it, "I was here. I loved. I never stopped." You send it back. The tide takes it gently. Behind you, your house hums. Your daughters laugh. Your wife calls your name like a song that never ends. You walk back home as the moon rises, as the sea sighs, as the night stretches long and soft. You are not afraid. You never were. Not really. And now, you are known. Not famous. Not legendary. Known. Which is all you ever wanted. So now, if you're lying there in the dark, perhaps half asleep, perhaps still smiling, know this. The tide is gentle tonight. It pulls without taking. It brings without asking. And somewhere, far away, but also very close, there's a quiet little village where the air smells of salt and stories, where a house hums lullabies to itself, where a fisherman once fell in love with a mermaid and found a world far weirder and far kinder than he ever dared imagine. That world didn't end when she left. It didn't end when she returned. It didn't even end when the sky opened and the sea remembered its name, because stories like this don't end. They linger, like warm soup, like laughter in the walls, like sea glass in your pocket long after the tide is gone. And maybe, just maybe, the sea remembers you too. The real you. The one who dared to love something impossible. The one who said yes to wonder. So breathe deeply now. Let the tide carry you. Let the sand hold you. Let the sea inside your ribs hush all the loudness of the day. You're safe here. You're warm. You're home. And if, in the middle of the night, you hear a wave gently tapping at your window, don't worry. It's just a friend saying goodnight. So go ahead. Let go. Sink down. Sleep. You are loved. Always. End of script. Sweet dreams. Hey guys. Tonight we're trudging through the sun-scorched sands of 1798. Egypt boots full of grit, brain full of questions, and definitely no working air conditioning in sight. You're part of Napoleon's expeditionary force, freshly plucked from soggy French taverns and tossed headfirst into a dazzling landscape of dunes, relics, and, surprisingly judgmental street cats. The heat isn't just inconvenient, it's malicious. Your boots squish with sweat you didn't know feet could generate, and every breath tastes like hot sandstone. The wool uniforms, starched and designed for stylish death in European winters, have become portable ovens. You swore you saw someone's epaulette melt. You've been in Egypt for all of 2 hours, and already you're wondering how the mighty empire builders of Rome, Persia, and now France ever thought this was a good idea? And then there's the sand. Oh, the sand. It's not just on the ground. It's in your bread, your eyelashes, and somehow between your molars, even though you've eaten nothing but hardtack and coffee. One man claims the sand whispered something to him. No one questions this. It probably did. You march in the back of a haphazard column that stretches toward the Nile, grumbling through the blinding mirage. The officers bark orders with that special kind of optimism, found only in men who haven't used a latrine in 48 hours. Someone swats at a fly and topples over a barrel of gunpowder. Another guy has a nervous breakdown after seeing a gecko. The sun has not been kind. As you wipe sweat from your brow with a sock that used to be dry this morning, you spot it, the first architectural marvel of the journey. The Great Pyramid of Giza. It rises out of the desert like a bad idea that someone committed to way too hard. It's majestic, yes, but also unhelpfully large. Why does it have to be so pointy? Someone mutters. Does it have an elevator? Napoleon, riding ahead on a very unimpressed-looking horse, squints toward the monument like it just insulted his handwriting. Historians still argue whether Napoleon truly said soldiers. From the top of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you. Or if he actually muttered something more along the lines of, ugh. I hate geometry. Either way, the grandeur of the moment is severely undercut by the fact that someone's hat just blew off and hit a camel. Still, there's a certain poetry to the chaos. You're marching through history, after all, and unlike your boots, that part never wears out. One surprising thing is how unbothered the locals seem. Vendors hawk dates and flatbread with polite indifference. Children laugh in alleyways. And then there are the cats. Cats everywhere, slinking across sandstone walls, lounging on the edges of ancient tombs, staring directly into your soul from a sunbeam. At first you think it's a coincidence. Egypt and cats, sure, classic combo. But by lunchtime, it's starting to feel suspicious. One tabby literally follows your regiment for half a mile, yowling as if conducting a roll call. By the time the sandstorm hits, and oh yes, it hits, you're wondering if the cats knew it was coming. They vanished moments before the sky turned to a swirling wall of tan fury, leaving your entire platoon flapping around like half-tied tents. Visibility drops to 0. Your commanding officer is last seen chasing his own hat, yelling something about Napoleon's wrath and the curse of Ra. Your pack mule sits down and refuses to move. You crouch near a dune, shielding your face, and there, serenely perched on a stone outcropping, is the same tabby, grooming itself in the storm. You blink, because honestly, how else does a cat seem cleaner after a sandstorm? You swear it smirks at you. That night, as you settle in with the rest of the sand-blasted survivors, someone asks, "Do you think the cats are spies?" Someone else nods, would explain why they always sit like they know something. No one laughs. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You fall asleep with grains of sand in your ears and the faint memory of a tale disappearing into the ruins. You wake up to someone shouting about a snake that turned out to be a stick and a stick that unfortunately turned out to be a snake. Welcome to Morning Roll Call in Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, where desert hallucinations are filed under normal logistical issues. The tents flap lazily in the still warm dawn, their fabric bleached and slightly crunchy from yesterday's sandstorm. A few unlucky souls are still trying to shake the dunes out of their bedrolls. The canteen coffee tastes like despair and cumin. Napoleon, meanwhile, is standing before the Great Pyramid in full uniform, hand tucked confidently into his coat, scowling like a man who just found out a pharaoh had better PR. He's not saying anything yet, just glaring at the structure as if he expects it to apologize for being tall. You hover nearby, mostly because someone told you this morning's assignment involved standing in awe and maybe holding a clipboard. It's less awe and more shin sweat at this point, but you're doing your best. A local guide is speaking rapidly in Arabic, gesturing toward the pyramid's intricate base. A translator beside him mutters. He says it's 146 meters tall, made of over 2 million limestone blocks. Napoleon leans in. How many cats do you think live in it? There's a pause. The translator blinks. Sir, I'm just saying, Napoleon mutters, eyes narrowed. That's a lot of corners. Cats love corners, very tactical. This is the first sign something's off. Not with the pyramid, with the entire expedition. Because a few days ago, your general-in-chief would have been calculating artillery angles and barking about conquering the East. Now, he's calculating feline population density in ancient monuments. You're not alone in noticing. Around camp, the soldiers have stopped naming their muskets and started naming cats. There's General Whiskers, who occupies an officer's tent, despite 0 military rank. Napoleon, a sleek black cat who stalks around like he owns the campaign. And Senor Meow Meow, a name no one wants to admit assigning, but everyone acknowledges with silent reverence. These cats, they're not just tolerated, they're revered. The mess tent has quietly started saving scraps. Someone built a shade shelter out of stolen uniform bits and one confiscated parasol. And every night, the cats return, strolling in like they're checking on their staff. You wander through the pyramid's shadow during break hour, sketchpad in hand, an excuse to be away from latrine duty. The air buzzes with heat and mystery. And cats, always cats. One rubs against your leg, then promptly settles onto your sketchpad. You try to shoo it. Gently, it stares at you. You apologize. You will apologize again tomorrow. Here's the thing. Historians still argue whether the army's sudden feline fascination was just the result of shared heat stroke, or something older, stranger. Egypt's history with cats goes back thousands of years. They were protectors, companions, even mummified. Bastet, goddess of home and fertility, was depicted as a lioness or domestic cat. And whether or not any of you actually believe that, there's a growing vibe around camp that maybe the cats are watching over something. Napoleon certainly starts acting like they're important. He begins referencing the sacred balance of the animal hierarchy. He assigns one lieutenant to observe feline territorial rituals, which mostly involve standing awkwardly while cats ignore him. Then there's the pyramid incident. An engineering squad, attempting to map the internal corridors of the Great Pyramid, claims to have lost a cat. Not a soldier, a cat. Apparently, Napoleon darted in during a survey and never came out. The entire mission is halted. A search party is organized. After 4 hours and 2 near faintings, Napoleon returns on his own, covered in dust, smug, carrying what looks like an ancient amulet. No one questions it. The amulet is sent to Cairo for analysis. The cat is awarded 3 strips of beef jerky and a tiny ribbon someone cut off a uniform. A week later, a mysterious clay tablet is discovered near a collapsed wall, and it contains, get this, a depiction of a man bowing to a cat wearing something suspiciously ribbon-shaped around its neck. Coincidence? Maybe. Cursed. Almost definitely. By now, entire patrols are being delayed by feline crossings. Muskets are being polished with a cat on each shoulder. You watch one officer cancel a duel because his opponent's tabby looked distressed. It's no longer a question of if the army is distracted. It's a question of how badly. One night, while gathering firewood, you spot something strange, a soldier quietly whittling a tiny cat statue from driftwood. For luck, he says, to leave in the pyramid. Another passes by wearing a scratched-up scrap of linen tied like a sash. He nods solemnly. Bastet's chosen. You don't even blink anymore. You just ask if he wants help adjusting the knot. You lay down that night on a woven mat, head still full of cats and cursed pyramids. From the edge of your eye, you see them, silhouettes in the moonlight. Quiet, present, watching. It's peaceful. Oddly so, you wonder, briefly, if this is what ancient Egyptian soldiers felt like gazing into the firelight while soft paws traced the sand nearby. Guardians both cryptic and domestic. You let your eyes close to the soft sound of purring just beyond the tent flap. You awaken to yelling, not the usual shouting, not the someone stole my biscuit or the my boot is full of scorpions yelling, but a sharp, undignified screech that makes everyone bolt upright in their tents like meerkats in uniform. Outside, chaos. Privat Lefebvre, who up until now was mostly known for snoring like a broken bellows, is running in frantic circles with a pan in one hand and a scarf in the other. I saw it. He cries. It brushed against me. He shivers violently. It looked right at my soul. Someone helpfully adds, it peed on his sock too. The reason for the madness. A cat, specifically, a well-fed, golden-furred feline with an expression that can only be described as disdainful grandmother at a budget buffet. It sits regally atop a crate of cannonballs, licking one paw with deliberate slowness. Around it, soldiers point and mutter like they've just discovered a minor deity, disguised as a loaf of fluff. You approach cautiously. It stares. You stare back. For a moment, you swear something unspoken passes between you, an ancient understanding, or perhaps a very simple message. You work for me now. You name her Cleopatra. Over the next few days, Cleopatra becomes an unofficial commander. Troops part for her in formation. Rations are gently placed in her path. A drummer boy is reassigned after calling her just a regular cat. You watch him scrub latrines for 3 days while she naps nearby, occasionally flicking her tail like a metronome of judgment. And then, it happens again. Another cat strolls into camp. This time, it's a gray tom with one torn ear and a strut like he owns the entire 18th century. He doesn't walk through the camp. He walks over it across tents, boxes, men, maps, and dreams. When he stops to nap, it's directly on the artillery manual, a very specific, very critical document that 4 men were in the middle of studying. The officers protest, mildly, then a bit more loudly. Then they just stop. The cat has not moved. Lieutenant Marchand tries to slide the manual out from under him. The cat gently swats his hand and resumes sleeping. That's how Napoleon's entire artillery schedule is delayed 12 hours, because a cat said no. You wonder, again, if any of this is normal. You wonder if the heat's finally fried your sense of authority. But you also kind of admire it. After all, you've seen entire regiments fall apart over a broken spoon. Why wouldn't a cat bring the empire to a halt? That evening, under a star-laced sky that smells faintly of lentils and camel breath, someone proposes the idea that maybe these cats aren't just cats. What if, the corporal says, eyes wide and dramatic, what if they're the reincarnated priests of Bastet? Someone else offers, or spies from a higher feline council, reporting back to what? You ask. A great cosmic litter box. He nods solemnly. Exactly. The campfire flickers. A tabby leaps gracefully onto a crate and curls up without a sound. No one dares move the crate again. Now, let's talk about the mounting feline infrastructure, because at this point, it's no longer just cats infiltrating camp. It's the camp adapting to them. Tiny bridges are built from crates so the cats don't have to walk through mud puddles. Blankets are laid in the shade. A corner of the mess tent now holds an unofficial cat table stocked with whatever food can be spared scraps. Fish bones, half a sausage someone pretended to drop. You find yourself personally hand-stitching a small hat. You don't question this anymore. It's for Cleopatra. She'll wear it. You hope. Meanwhile, the manual cat, now dubbed General Polyon, has apparently claimed the command tent. His preferred seat is atop the map of Alexandria. A soldier once tried to fold the map while he was sitting on it and was immediately reassigned to latrine duty for logistical insubordination. Napoleon doesn't seem bothered. If anything, he's inspired. During one of his strategy briefings read, dramatic pacing with occasional threats of brilliance. He stops mid-sentence, turns, and says, "These cats, they organize without orders, move without hesitation, sleep without guilt. We could learn from them." And thus begins the feline observational tactic fought seminars. These are not formal lectures. They are more like extended staring contests with cats followed by intense philosophical debates. One officer believes Cleopatra is communicating in tail flicks. Another swears General Polyon tapped out Morse code with his whiskers. Historians still argue whether any of this led to real tactical innovations, but it did lead to the invention of the Napoleon cat stare. A 1,000-yard gaze adopted by men who've just watched a kitten roll in a map of enemy positions and fall asleep on the Nile Delta. You would think morale would plummet under such absurdity. It doesn't. In fact, it improves drastically. No one wants to admit it. But cats make war marginally less awful. There's something stabilizing about having a warm, purring presence perched on your knee while the world burns behind you. The entire army becomes softer, not less dangerous, mind you, but gently distracted, a little fuzzier around the edges. Fewer arguments, more naps, less yelling, a peculiar sense of unity, bonded by shared service under feline overlords, and through it all, you remain the cat hat tailor. You finish Cleopatra's headwear regal purple, 2 golden tassels, 1 feather from an unfortunate chicken. She tolerates it for 17 seconds, then bites it and walks away. You consider it a success. That night, as the stars bloom and a breeze slips between the tents, you find a quiet moment. Cleopatra curls at your side. General Paulian blinks once from atop a barrel. Somewhere in the distance, a soldier softly sings a lullaby to his tabby. You lean back on the warm sand, eyes closing, and wonder what the history books will say. Will they remember the battle formations, the military missteps, or will there be a quiet paragraph, perhaps one footnote about the army that stopped its march for a cat nap? You're brushing your teeth with stale mint paste and sand because there's no escaping sand and thinking you've seen it all. You've watched a cat hold up artillery logistics. You've sewn a miniature feathered helmet. You've nodded seriously, while a major explained that cats instinctively align their spines with ley lines, and yet, nothing prepares you for the Bastet Debate Club. It begins casually enough, as most military weirdness does. A few scholarly types attached to the expedition astronomers, naturalists, armchair. Egyptologists with suspiciously delicate boots start gathering in the evenings near the campfire. Their conversation begins with weather patterns and burial practices. By the third night, it becomes heated. I'm telling you. One insists, slamming down a dusty scroll. Bastet is still active. These cats know things. Or counters another. They're cats, and we're all slowly going insane from dehydration. You, being very much in the latter camp, but fond of gossip, sit in with a bowl of lentils and settle in to listen. There are arguments over the metaphysical. Someone claims cats can sense earthquakes. Another insists they've watched a tabby predict a food shortage 3 hours before the bread ran out. A medic swears a cat once led him to a lost comrade in the dunes. Like it knew. Man, like it knew. It escalates when one of the officers, half drunk on date wine and conspiracy, suggests the cats might be channeling the goddess Bastet herself. You choke slightly on a lentil. Several others nod with alarming seriousness. A cat possibly named Cornichon jumps onto the makeshift debate table and knocks over 3 mugs, a scroll, and one very fragile ego. It then stretches and proceeds to stare directly into the eyes of the man who just suggested cat gods. No one says anything. The fire crackles. You shift uncomfortably and try to remember how logic works. It turns out that's a wasted effort, because by the next evening, the debate has turned into a full-blown ritual planning session. You're assigned to candle duty. No one explains what the candles are for. One guy starts drawing eyes on pebbles and burying them for protective vibes. Another tries to read cat paw prints like tea leaves. You ask, "Are we really doing this?" A sergeant nods solemnly. "It's for morale." And he's not wrong. Morale has been unusually high. No one's gotten into a fistfight in 3 days. Someone repaired the latrines voluntarily. There's even music again, soft humming. Improvised drums, a flute made from the barrel of a broken musket. Maybe the cats are channeling something, divine or otherwise. Napoleon, predictably, has opinions. You hear them the next day when he calls an open forum. He doesn't say debate club because Napoleon doesn't hold clubs. He hosts strategic symposiums. You attend mostly for the shade and biscuits. He paces dramatically in front of a tapestry someone borrowed from a temple wall. It depicts Bastet with her usual elegance, cat head, sistrum in hand, flanked by offerings. You half expect it to wink. "We are," Napoleon says, standing in the cradle of civilization. "These creatures," he gestures vaguely at Cleopatra, sleeping on his boot are not mere animals. They are symbols. Of what? He doesn't say. You suspect he's making it up as he goes. Someone from the crowd calls. "So, are we fighting with the cats or for them?" Napoleon glares. "With, obviously." General Paulian sneezes. It's a surprisingly dignified sound. And so, by imperial decree or collective sunstroke, Bastet becomes the army's unofficial co-commander. Not in any formal capacity, of course, but you'd be surprised how many orders start with "as Bastet wills it." You're sent on a supply run to a local village the next day, a routine assignment. You and 3 others ride out with a cart and a very enthusiastic donkey named Jean-Claude. Your mission is simple. Find bread, water, and if possible, a jar of pickled lemons the cook insists he once dreamt about. The village is quiet. The air carries the scent of cardamom and sun-warmed stone, and cats everywhere. They lounge on windowsills, weave between market stalls, nap in woven baskets. Some have collars, most have attitude. One particularly fluffy specimen blocks your path and refuses to move. You try coaxing, then bribing. then begging. It blinks slowly. You're forced to reroute. While your companions gather supplies, you chat with an old woman who sits by a fountain, feeding scraps to a semicircle of attentive felines. She smiles as you approach. "They're guardians," she says softly, tossing a scrap to a ginger cat. "The cats always have been. See the one with the bent tail? He's been here since my childhood." You raise an eyebrow. The cat does not look a day over 5. "They remember things," she says. "Things the stones forget." You don't know what that means, but it feels true. In the strange way things do when you've seen an entire war camp rearranged because a kitten decided the latrine was now a throne room. Back at base, you deliver the supplies. The cook finds the jar of pickled lemons and bursts into tears. It's exactly like the dream. You smile and head to your tent, tired but oddly comforted. Outside, a new cat waits for you. Calico, one eye, fur like patchwork linen. She follows you in and curls up on your blanket like she's been doing it forever. You don't even ask her name. You just say, "Good night, Bastet," and let sleep pull you down. You've seen a lot of strange things since arriving in Egypt, but today is special because nothing in your vast and now deeply cat-centric military experience prepares you for a camel getting into a standoff with a house cat. It begins innocently enough. Morning chores. Someone loses a boot in a cooking pot. Another drops a crate of musket balls into a latrine trench. And Cleopatra, the cat, steals an officer's quill and dramatically parades it around like a royal scepter. Just another day under Napoleon. Then the shouting starts. You rush over, expecting another spontaneous "I duel thee for my sock" situation. What you find instead is a growing crowd of soldiers forming a loose semicircle around a very large, very unimpressed camel and a small, perfectly still orange cat. They are facing each other. Neither blinks. The camel, named Bertrand, is known for being rather haughty even by camel standards. He once spat directly into a captain's boots and was rewarded with more carrots for asserting his boundaries. The cat, who no one recognizes, though someone claims it might be an ancient spirit named Kevin, has positioned itself directly in Bertrand's path, tail curled, eyes unyielding. No one speaks. Then Bertrand takes one noble, indignant step forward. The cat twitches an ear. He stops. The tension is electric. You whisper to the guy beside you, "Are we watching a duel?" He nods. Shh. It's the final round. A full minute passes. Someone coughs. Then, in a moment that will be whispered about for generations, Bertrand sits, a long, slow, defeated plop. The cat flicks its tail once and turns its back, strolling away with the self-assured stride of a god in sandals. The crowd erupts into hushed gasps and reverent muttering. Someone begins sketching the scene. The camel, still seated, looks vaguely embarrassed. That afternoon, you find a bulletin posted outside the mess tent. Official regimental update. Kevin is now our camel whisperer. Signed, Corporal Dupont, Chief Witness, Eye Contact Division. You can't make this stuff up. Later, over a watery stew and some strangely spicy flatbread, you overhear Napoleon muttering to himself, "We've lost air superiority." To a cat, apparently, the Army's hot air balloon, Le Papillon, was grounded that morning due to a cat curling up in its basket and refusing to vacate. The ground crew waited 5 hours. They tried snacks. They tried gentle persuasion. Eventually, they gave up and called it a tactical repositioning due to feline wind resistance. At this point, no one even argues anymore. You spend part of the evening in the field hospital, helping to distribute bandages and boiled water. Not because you're injured, but because the medic owns a cat that sits perfectly still on the corner of his supply table, and everyone believes it improves the success rate of minor surgery. The cat's name is Dr. Biscuits. He wears a ribbon. By moonrise, there's another peculiar sight. Napoleon has called an informal gathering. It's not a briefing. It's not an inspection. It's something stranger. You, along with 30 or so others, are summoned to the edge of the ruins just outside camp. The general appears from the shadows like a theatrical shadow puppet, hands clasped behind his back, and announces, "We must understand their power." No one asks who they are. Everyone knows. He means the cats. What follows is, essentially, an improvisational summit on feline behavior. Napoleon gestures toward various cats that happen to be nearby and assigns them wartime traits. That one, he says, pointing to a lazy tortoiseshell sprawled on a crate, has mastered passive resistance. He moves on. That tabby, perfect infiltration agent, operates entirely at night, disappears at will, no footprints. He's not wrong. Then, observe this gray one counterintelligence. Stares at me during meals, knows my secrets. You're about to laugh, but then the gray one does stare at you in a way that makes you reconsider the entire trajectory of your life. At some point, Napoleon sits cross-legged, hands on knees. Cats gather. They perch on his boots, curl behind his elbows, sniff his hat. You wonder if this is the world's first tactical cuddle pile. You are not hallucinating. This is just history. Historians still argue whether this night marked the official transition from military occupation to spiritual side quest. The records are unclear. Some diaries call it the moment the war relaxed. Others refer to it simply as the nap. You find your own patch of soft sand and sit beside a sergeant absent-mindedly combing the fur of a cat named Tomato. He says, "I think we're in a story now." You nod. It certainly feels like one. Somewhere behind you, Bertrand the camel lets out a philosophical sigh. A cat answers with a yawn. You lean back and stare at the stars, those ancient witnesses, watching from above as one of Europe's most disciplined armies learns to be slightly less disciplined. It's not peace, exactly, but it's something close. And as you doze off to the rhythmic sound of paws padding over tent flaps and the occasional distant meow, you think maybe not all victories need battles. Some are won by being still, by choosing calm, by honoring the cat who simply refused to move. There are many ways for an army to fall apart. You always imagined it would be the usual suspect supply chain failure, heat stroke, or perhaps a particularly impressive ambush. You did not expect it to start with a cat knocking over an inkwell during an artillery briefing. It's mid-morning, and the officers are gathered around a carefully drawn diagram of fortifications near Cairo. There are rulers. There is parchment. There are at least 4 types of ink and one man wearing 2 monocles, presumably to enhance his tactical scowl. Then comes the interruption. A gentle plonk, a soft scrabble of paws, and before anyone can utter sacre-bleu, a gray and white kitten has launched itself onto the war table, flipped the inkwell, stepped in it, and proceeded to leave little blue paw prints across the entire battle plan. At first, there's silence. Then a very senior colonel says, "We could trace around them, use them as arrow indicators." Someone else mutters, "They're symmetrical. It's a sign." You slowly back away from the table, because it's becoming obvious. This is not going to be fixed with logic. By lunch, the updated plan is posted. It features revised troop movements labeled Paw 1, Paw 2, and Strategic Nap Zone. No one complains. Honestly, it kind of works. Meanwhile, back at the central camp, the cats have adopted new hobbies. One begins hoarding the shiny brass buttons off discarded uniforms. Another starts attending roll call, always arriving late, stretching conspicuously, and sitting in the exact center of the formation. But the strangest development arrives that evening when you stumble across a shrine. It's located near the mess tent, discreet but clearly intentional. A low table, a ring of smooth stones, and at the center, a pile of sardines, arranged like an offering. Above them, drawn in charcoal, is a surprisingly dignified cat face with rays beaming out like the sun. You stand beside Private Moreau, who's lighting a small candle. "Did you do this?" You whisper. He shrugs. "Not alone. We thought, maybe they like it." "Who's they?" He doesn't answer, just drops a sardine onto the pile and murmurs, "For Kevin, this becomes the new normal." By day, the army drills, marches, and occasionally forgets why it's even there. By night, the cats reign. Little rituals spring up, offering bowls of milk near tent doors, softly singing lullabies in feline honor, even reciting the purring benediction before bed. No one knows who wrote it, but it ends with "May your dreams be mouse-filled." One officer constructs a tiny cat-sized chaise longue. Another paints a formal portrait of General Pollion reclining like a Roman senator. It's weird. It's adorable. It's deeply concerning. You begin to suspect the cats know, not just about the attention they know they're in charge. You test this one afternoon by placing 2 full bowls of fish at equal distance and watching to see which one a passing tabby chooses. It sits between them and looks at you. You try again the next day, same result. The third day, you don't set out any food. The tabby walks up, flicks your ankle with its tail, and departs. You feel judged. Deservedly. Napoleon remains, as ever, 1 part fascinated and 3 parts dramatic, during a speech that starts about troop movements and ends up being an ode to feline posture. He remarks, "Men collapse under the sun. Cats lounge. There is something strategic in their arrogance." You start taking notes, not for warfare, for manners. And then, something unexpected. A scholar in your ranks, Professor Duvet, an archaeologist known mostly for falling into holes, claims to have found an ancient scroll. It mentions, he wheezes, dramatically waving the parchment, a temple where cats were bathed in saffron and oiled with cedar. "Is it nearby?" someone asks. He nods, allegedly buried beneath that hill, with the 2 palm trees and the suspiciously purring rocks. Within an hour, an entire team is digging like it's a beach holiday. Cats gather to supervise. The pit is shallow. The find, modest, 1 broken column, 2 faded inscriptions, and a single cat-shaped amulet, which you're pretty sure someone made that morning, but no one questions it. Napoleon visits the site personally. He studies the amulet, turns to his officers, and declares, "We will not only conquer, we will honor." Then he leaves, with 2 cats flanking him like royal guards. That night, by firelight, a new decree is posted. All units to report weekly on cat activity metrics cam. This includes paw print density, nap radius, meow duration, and something called fur frequency. You, as always, volunteered to sketch. Your current assignments include measuring the average diameter of a sleeping circle, charting the migratory pattern of orange cats between crates, documenting 1 cat's progress in attempting to open a barrel of salted fish using only vibes. He's almost there. Historians still argue whether these behaviors were madness, moral strategy, or an ancient spiritual reawakening. Frankly, the army doesn't care, because for the first time in weeks, they're calm, not lazy, not detached, but genuinely serene. There's something about the cats, their stillness, their autonomy, their unshakable belief that the world will always rotate to their preferred sunbeam. You start sleeping more deeply, eating more slowly, listening, watching, and you're not alone. The army marches slower now, but it also laughs more, fights less, invents lullabies, builds cat hammocks, leaves a tiny pyramid of sardines on every hill you leave behind. You're not sure what kind of campaign this is anymore, but it's no longer about conquest. It's become a quiet, fur-lined kind of surrender, and it feels just right. You wake to the sound of an officer whisper yelling about tuna. This has become the new normal. Apparently, 2 crates of preserved sardines critical for officer rations, and occasionally black market trading have disappeared overnight. No tracks, no forced latches, just gone. Someone swears they saw a tabby with a can opener expression. Another claims the fish simply shifted realities. The official theory, cat theft. Elaborate, intentional, and possibly mystical cat theft. You put on your boots, one of which now permanently smells like mint and fish, and step into the rising heat, bracing for another day of war being gently and irrevocably overridden by furballs. At the center of camp, Napoleon is standing on a crate, dramatically pointing toward the mess tent. "They've evolved," he says. You're not sure whether he means the cats or the enemy forces. Either way, it's probably accurate. Nearby, a corporal is interviewing a soldier who saw a shadow with whiskers leap across the supply wagon and vanish into a pile of tent canvas. Another soldier offers a hand-drawn wanted poster. It's just a crude cat face with the words "known fish thief" written in 4 languages. The fish is gone. The cats are not. This is the great sardine bribery scandal, and it goes deeper than anyone expects, because that afternoon, under cover of latrine relocation duty, you and 3 others discover a hidden stash behind the old cart storage. It's a cave. Well, a dent in a hillside, but inside, carefully arranged and glistening in the dim light, are dozens of opened tins, perfectly clean, fishless, licked with precision. They've built a hoard. At the center, sprawled like a sphinx atop a flattened officer's hat, is General Paulian. His eyes gleam. He does not move. He does not need to. Should we report this? One of your group whispers. You shake your head. No, this is above us. Instead, you light a small candle, bow slightly, and leave a fresh sardine just outside the entrance. Tribute. By nightfall, the entire scandal becomes a kind of legend, a camp-wide whisper, and, weirdly, a point of pride. Someone makes medals, tiny ones. They say Operation Fishnet, first class. The cook discovers half of his pantry labels have been replaced with symbols only the cats seem to understand. One of the labels reads Sacred Fish. Do not touch. He does not touch. There's a general consensus that the cats are running a full intelligence network. You witness the following evidence. A kitten delivers a rolled message to an officer's tent. 2 tomcats stare pointedly at a half-buried treasure map left by a rogue archaeologist. A black and white cat sits on the signal drum until someone relays a message. It's like they've formed a union, or a guild, possibly a congress. Someone proposes a vote on making them formal citizens of the expedition. Another suggests a shared council, 1 human, 1 feline representative per platoon. You try not to laugh, because frankly, the idea of being outvoted by a Siamese with a superiority complex seems very possible. In the middle of this bureaucratic feline revolution, Napoleon decides to hold what he calls the Midnight Meow Summit. You are summoned at 22:00 hours. You think it's a joke? It is not. The general sits cross-legged in the shadow of a broken statue, surrounded by the elite of the expedition, officers, scholars, a cartographer, a man who once trained a goat to fetch grape shot, and, of course, many cats. You notice the air smells like cardamom and crushed sardine tins. Napoleon clears his throat. We have been blessed, he begins, with an order far older than any republic, an empire of eyes, claws, and silent judgment. He gestures to Cleopatra, sitting on a pillow that definitely belonged to a major before she took it. They ask for nothing. They command everything. You suppress a yawn and a very unhelpful giggle. From this point on, he declares, we consult them, not just in spirit, but formally. And thus, the Cat Advisory Council is born. You are appointed scribe to the whiskered. It is a prestigious title. Comes with a blanket, your duties. Record daily observations. Chart nap rotations. Translate meows. The last task proves the most difficult. Fortunately, there's a new recruit, Antoine the Scholar, a linguist who once tried to write a grammar book for bees. He now attempts to develop a translation lexicon for feline speech. It includes terms like merp, disapproval of footwear, purr, blink, general contentment, also mild contempt, meh, emergency sardine shortage, philosophical disagreement, possibly directed at French foreign policy. Historians still argue whether any of these terms had real merit, or if Antoine was simply lonely and allergic to context. Regardless, the Manual of Purrs becomes a bestseller within the camp. You copy the first edition by hand, adding footnotes like, do not interrupt mid-grooming and never make eye contact during a tail twitch. Meanwhile, more sardines vanish. The stash cave expands. Rumor spreads that the cats have created multiple caches and that one particularly rotund feline is bartering dried shrimp for string. You find yourself wondering, has the army been conquered, infiltrated, enlightened? One morning, you catch Napoleon standing atop a dune, arms folded, staring at a trio of cats silhouetted by the sun. He doesn't speak. Then, we march at dawn. To where, you ask? He turns slowly. Where the cats lead. He's not joking. You march, the cats walk ahead, and somehow, it all feels right. At this point, you don't even pretend to understand military objectives. You wake up, you follow the cats, and you hope the path leads to food, shade, or enlightenment. Napoleon's newest strategy, affectionately called the pause-forward doctrine, consists primarily of marching in the general direction of wherever the feline delegation seems interested in going. It sounds ludicrous, is ludicrous, but disturbingly, it works. The cats avoid the worst sandstorms. They veer away from crocodile-infested waters. One day, they lead you to an oasis previously unmapped by any European source, which is now universally referred to as Whiskers Well. The water tastes slightly of limes and destiny, so when you and your contingent crest a dune and spot something that looks suspiciously like the entrance to a forgotten temple, you don't even raise an eyebrow. Of course, the cats brought you here. You're sent ahead with a few volunteers to investigate. Napoleon calls this an honor. which roughly translates to "I'm staying back where there are snacks." The temple is half swallowed by sand, its columns cracked and weary, but unmistakably ancient. Hieroglyphs wind along the stone, depicting what appear to be cats, lounging, playing, wearing headdresses. You think, please let this be the temple of infinite scritches. Inside, it's cool and still. The air smells of age and spices and maybe a hint of smug fur. You light a torch and proceed with caution, flanked by Antoine the linguist and Dr. Biscuits, the honorary medic cat, who insists on being carried. The first chamber contains murals huge, sweeping depictions of felines lounging atop golden pillows while humans fan them, offer fish, and write what looks suspiciously like poetry in their honor. Antoine gasps. These are odes. You blink. To the cats. He nods. To their wisdom and their tales. Further in, you reach what must have been a sanctuary, a circular room with a domed ceiling, its center raised slightly like a throne. Around the edge, small bowls, once filled with offerings. You notice the faint smell of mint, perhaps from incense once burned here. Dr. Biscuits leaps from your arms and perches on the central stone. He yawns. Then, with the ceremonial grace of an emperor, begins grooming himself. Antoine falls to one knee. This is it. He breathes. This is where it happened. Where what happened? He gazes at you with wide, unblinking awe. The ascension of purrs. You wait for him to explain. He does not. Instead, he opens his satchel and removes a scroll he's been writing titled The 9 Lives Doctrine, Reincarnation and Royalty in the Feline Pantheon. It has a footnote citing Cleopatra the cat, not the queen, as a primary source. You want to protest. You want to laugh. Instead, you kneel beside him, because honestly, you're starting to believe. Back in camp, the others begin arriving. Some bring supplies. Some bring sketchbooks. One brings a lute and composes a hymn called O Bastet. Take my lint. Napoleon arrives last, dramatic as always. He walks into the sanctuary, regards the stone, regards Dr. Biscuits, and then slowly, deeply bows. No one dares to speak. Later, you find him scribbling furiously in his notebook. You peek. The page is filled with phrases like, cats understand terrain better than scouts. Avoid conflict. Observe. Nap. Why fight over land when one may gracefully occupy the warmest stone? That afternoon, a new regimental order is issued. All soldiers are to spend at least 1 hour per day in feline proximity quietude. Translated, pet a cat, reflect, repeat. Discipline improves, sleep deepens, morale skyrockets. The cats begin hosting their own informal ceremonies. You watch as they gather in concentric circles at sunset. Facing west, a few meow in harmony. It is hauntingly beautiful. One night, the wind shifts and brings with it a soft chant. Soldiers are singing, quietly, reverently, a lullaby for their adopted feline gods. The lyrics are suspiciously about sardines. You lie on your back outside the temple, Dr. Biscuits pressed against your side, and consider how strange this all is, that this journey of conquest has become one of cuddles and cosmic reverence, that your greatest general now accepts orders from beings who lick their own toes in meetings, and yet you feel peaceful. Historians still argue whether the Temple of Infinite Scritches was real, or just a metaphor for collective psychological unraveling in the heat. But to you, it will always be the place where something shifted, where humans laid down maps and muskets and learned the wisdom of stillness, of blinking slowly, of moving only when necessary, and of walking away from battles in favor of sunbeams. That night, Napoleon speaks softly to the assembled troops. He says, "We came here seeking empire, but perhaps we found something better." He pauses. Perspective. A tabby coughs up a hairball at the dramatic beat. It feels perfect. The next morning, you wake up sandwiched between 2 cats and a lieutenant who's murmuring in his sleep about feline tax policies. The temple sanctuary glows in the dawn light. A breeze wanders through the carved columns like a sleepy ghost, and you can hear soft purring echo from multiple corners. The cats now hold full control of the camp's schedule. If they nap, you nap. If they wander, so do you. If one of them sits directly on the war drum, that means no drills that day. Only philosophical stillness exercises, which are basically long, quiet sit-downs interrupted occasionally by someone sneezing or a particularly loud purr. But today is special. It starts with a trumpet blast, not for war, not for retreat, but for a parade. The first regimental cat parade. You think it's a joke? It's not. A new directive is posted in the camp square. It reads, "By decree of General Napoleon Bonaparte, Supreme Strategist and Co-Consultant to the Cat Advisory Council, a celebration of unity between French forces and our most noble feline allies shall commence at sunset. Uniforms optional. Tiny hats encouraged. All cats shall be honored. All soldiers shall participate. Fish shall be served." The planning begins immediately. You're assigned to the Decoration Corps. Your job: create sashes for cats. You start with scraps of ribbon and end up hand embroidering gold thread into little medallions. One design features crossed whiskers. Another shows a can of sardines wreathed in laurel. You're not proud of how much you care. You just do. Others sew banners, paint signs, construct a miniature triumphal arch using spare tent poles and the bones of a broken latrine frame. A young private designs a float for Cleopatra made entirely out of bread and softened linen. She tests it, approves it, immediately falls asleep on it. The culinary division, now essentially a gourmet fishery, prepares lavish dishes. Sardines soufflées, fish stew, smoked river perch served with rosemary and regret. The musicians rehearse a marching tune that incorporates several meows and one spontaneous hiss. You help coordinate the lineup. It goes like this. First platoon, bearing offerings of cooked chicken livers. Second platoon, holding banners depicting past miracles performed by the cats, including the time Kevin allegedly hissed and saved a man from stepping on a scorpion. Artillery division, rolling out a wagon retrofitted into a mobile nap platform, decorated with feathers and a single lavender cushion. The cats, just the cats. They appear from every corner of the ruins, strolling in as if they invented parades. No rush, no chaos, just confident, silky-footed precision. They take their places on the floats, in the arms of soldiers, on banners. One perches atop the triumphal arch. Another rides on Bertrand the camel, who looks mildly insulted but cooperates. Napoleon himself leads the procession, walking beside General Polleon, who wears a helmet fashioned from a polished cooking pot and a spoon. As the parade moves through camp, something strange happens. People cheer, real, joyful, belly-deep cheers. You watch grizzled officers wiping away tears, young privates singing, a grumpy sergeant who hasn't smiled since Toulon grinning like someone just told him cannonballs are edible. Even the cooks weep when Cleopatra bats delicately at her parade sash and allows someone to tie it into a bow. And the cats, they just absorb it. The adoration, the music, the absurdity, all with the quiet pride of creatures who've never doubted they deserve this treatment. That evening, long after the last fishbone has been picked clean and the sun has settled into a burnt orange sigh on the horizon, you find yourself lying in the sand beside Dr. Biscuits and Antoine the linguist. "We're not a military anymore," Antoine whispers. "No," you agree. "We're a cult, or a dance troupe," he adds. "A fish-themed, cat-led dance troupe." Dr. Biscuits purrs. Above you, the stars blink to life. The temple glows faintly in the distance. Cats lounge across every ledge, glowing in firelight, twitching tails in contentment. Somewhere, someone starts a slow chant. It has no words, just rhythm and breath, and a kind of peaceful surrender. It spreads. You lie back and let it wash over you. And for the first time since landing in Egypt, you forget what the original mission even was. You no longer care about maps or muskets or messages from Paris. You care about the cats, the warmth beside you, the quiet, the feeling that, somehow, in following pause instead of plans, you've found something bigger than war. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's nonsense. Maybe it's just fur and fish. But whatever it is, it's perfect. You now measure time in naps, not hours, not days, just intervals between when the cats fall asleep and when they yawn and stretch like gods deciding to resume their dominion. After the parade, something shifts in the camp, not in a political or structural way, but deeper, quieter, more spiritual. People speak softly now. They pet with purpose. They tiptoe around purring soldiers and refer to the cats in formal tones. "Her Grace is under the mess table. His Majesty just knocked over the ink again. I believe the Duchess of Mermaid has taken the northern hammock." You've stopped asking questions, which is how you find yourself today, trailing behind a lanky corporal and 3 cats into a side corridor of the ruins marked with a peculiar glyph: an eye, a tail, and a fish. The cats stop often, usually to sniff something invisible or roll briefly in sand that, to you, looks identical to all other sand. You wait, respectfully. Eventually, you reach it. A second, smaller shrine, more hidden, more intact. It's been partially excavated by the cats, who clearly dug through 1/2 meter of sand. You suspect the process involved absolutely no tools and a lot of smugness. Inside, murals, but not just of lounging cats. These show something more complicated. A cycle, people bowing, cats leading them through what looks like, yes, a series of meetings, parades, even naps. One mural, astonishingly, seems to depict a French-style coat being draped over a lounging feline. "Oh no," whispers the corporal. They knew. Antoine arrives soon after, scrolls in hand, breathless from excitement and general poor fitness. "This is a full calendar," he says, pointing to a series of symbols. "An entire annual cycle of feline observances. Any holidays?" He nods solemnly. 12. Most of them involve fish. From this point on, the shrine becomes an unofficial observatory, not for the stars, but for paws. Each day, soldiers arrive and attempt to match the behavior of local cats with the carvings. One feline naps in a perfect spiral and is immediately declared the Ouroboros of tranquility. Another twitches in her sleep. 2 soldiers swear she is dreaming of battle tactics and begin sketching formations inspired by the paw twitch rhythm. One captain designs an entire defense system based on tail flicks. Napoleon approves it. He begins calling this era the Enlightenment of Whiskers. You are assigned to chronicle the observed miracles. Day 1. A cat stared directly into a lantern, which promptly extinguished itself, declared an omen of humility. Day 3. Kevin, the one-eyed cat, sat on a shipment of lemons, which later turned out to be fermented, declared a warning against excess. Day 7. Cleopatra meowed precisely when 2 officers began arguing, causing both men to stop, apologize, and share their rations, declared a lesson in unity. You also record the disputed miracles. Day 4. General Paulian knocked over a full coffee pot. Was this divine cleansing or just gravity? Debate ongoing. Day 6. Dr. Biscuits allegedly healed a sprained ankle by lying on it. Results inconclusive, but the man swears he now dreams in meows. At this point, the lines between reverence and ridiculousness have thoroughly dissolved. You now kneel each morning to a small cat statue someone carved from sandstone. Its nose is chipped. Its attitude is perfect. The French forces, once a proud, efficient, occasionally bloodthirsty machine, have become domestic, still armed, still vigilant, but softer. It's astonishing. One man writes poetry now. Another has taken up weaving. A whole unit composes lullabies. The drummer's boy is learning to draw. He sketches cats almost exclusively, often riding camels into space. You've stopped correcting him. Historians still argue whether Napoleon lost the war in Egypt because of British naval interference or because of an army-wide feline cult that sapped all aggression and replaced it with extremely polite cohabitation. Napoleon does not seem to mind. He now walks the camp with a cat on each shoulder, Cleopatra on the right, Paulian on the left. They balance like twin muses of mayhem and serenity. He takes their movements as counsel. If Cleopatra sneezes, he delays a march. If Paulian naps beside the latrine trench, that trench is now considered holy ground and cordoned off with flags and flowers. You find yourself invited to a war council not for strategy, but for cat enrichment planning. The official topic: rotating scratching post zones to prevent spiritual fatigue. You contribute an idea about building a reflection chamber, a quiet tent where soldiers may lie beside cats and contemplate the meaning of tail movement. The idea is approved. Fabric is repurposed. Cushions are found. 4 cats volunteer themselves immediately and refuse to leave. The first man to enter lies down, closes his eyes, and says, "I think I understand now. War is a noise. Cats are the silence afterward." He is promoted. You're not sure to what, just promoted. At sunset, you sit beside the second shrine, sipping warm tea with a sprig of mint, and watching Antoine translate a mural that appears to depict a cat ascending to the stars via a fish-shaped cloud. He whispers, "They always knew we'd come." Not to conquer, to learn. You nod. The cats nap in a perfect triangle beside him. One snores softly. You consider writing that down. Instead, you lie back, arms behind your head, eyes drifting up to the stars above the temple dome. They shimmer like fish scales in moonlight, and somewhere, in the quiet between breaths, you swear you hear purring, not from the cats, from the air itself. You've just woken up from a nap so deep that you're not sure if it lasted an hour or a dynasty. There's cat hair in your mouth, your knees, your journal, and very possibly in your dreams. The reflection chamber has become your favorite place in Egypt, not because it's quiet, but because it smells faintly of lemon balm, and you can lie in it without being asked to do anything productive. The army, as it turns out, has not disbanded. Not technically. The supply lines still function barely. Officers still wear boots, some with cats in them. Muskets are still cleaned, though not too loudly, lest they disturb a nap. But the mission has shifted. Today's objective is simple: protect the fish cart. It started as a joke. Someone painted sacred sardine transport unit on the side of a battered wagon. And now, it's a critical asset. Every morning, the cart is loaded with fish gathered from nearby markets and traders, carefully chilled with wet cloths, and blessed by the feline council. Read, sniffed thoroughly, and claimed via paw print. You're assigned as part of the sardine escort detail. Your weapon, a feather duster. Your armor, a tunic with a cat stitched on the back, and the phrase, "In sardines we trust." As you walk beside the cart, flanked by cats, it feels more like a holy procession than a logistical task. Locals nod solemnly. A few toss flower petals. Someone offers smoked eel. Dr. Biscuits rides up front like a pope. And then, disaster. A sandstorm. Quick, sudden, brutal. You hear it before you see it. The low growl of wind across the dunes. The rising sting of grit against your cheeks. And then the full fury of the desert swallowing the horizon. You shout, "Protect the cart." Though really, everyone's already diving to shield it. Blankets thrown. Tarps secured. Cats tucked into deep folds of fabric, hissing with more annoyance than fear. You curl against the side of the wagon, eyes shut, face turned away from the sand. It howls, it shrieks. You lose track of time. When it finally passes, you emerge looking like a failed loaf of dust-coated bread. The cart, still intact. The fish, slightly warm. The cats, glorious. One even stands on top of the wagon like a victorious explorer, fur fluffed dramatically, tail straight like a banner of survival. The camp celebrates that night. A spontaneous feast is held around the cart, under strings of lanterns made from old soup tins and spare buttons. Soldiers wear flower crowns. Cats wear sashes. Antoine recites a new prayer titled Ode to the Whiskered Resilience. Napoleon declares the sandstorm an attempted desert coup, thwarted by the divine will of feline logistics. He rewards the cart with an official medal. It jingles now when it rolls. You sit on a flat stone, eating roasted fish with your fingers, surrounded by laughter, music, and fur. You realize slowly, warmly, that this may be the first true joy you've seen since landing in Egypt. And then comes the scholar, unassuming, small spectacles, smells faintly of ink and bread. He approaches the campfire holding a scroll. Its edges are cracked with age. "I believe," he says. "I have translated the purring." You blink. "Come again." He clears his throat. "I've been analyzing vocalizations, tones, vibrational frequencies, contextual paw gestures. I believe the cats are speaking in an ancient dialect, possibly the original dialect." He holds up the scroll. It contains a series of symbols, some vaguely cat-shaped, some resembling fish, a few just aggressive spirals. They're not meowing. They're reciting prayers, warnings, possibly weather forecasts. He points to one symbol. "This," he says, "was repeated 3 times before the last sandstorm." Napoleon is summoned. He inspects the scroll, says nothing, then calmly assigns the scholar an assistant, 3 guards, and his own personal cat, whom he renames Oracle. Within days, the purring lexicon is distributed. It contains a glossary of suspected meanings, sample phrases. "We honor your snack. No more patting. I wish to occupy this cushion." One controversial entry titled, "The Sacred Hiss of Disapproval Advanced Level." You receive a copy. Everyone does. It's printed on recycled map paper. By the following week, You notice soldiers murmuring to cats with strange rhythm. Murro chick chick purr blink. The cats stare, blink, and, occasionally, sit on their heads, which is universally interpreted as a blessing. You attend a feline literacy circle one night. 5 soldiers reading their cats' poetry and asking for reactions. Cleopatra bats one poem clean off the table. Its author weeps tears of joy. Meanwhile, Napoleon begins giving orders with a tail translator on hand. He points. The translator watches a tabby's tail twitch. Right flank. Retreat, but elegantly. He declares. Morale reaches a historic high. Historians still argue whether this linguistic breakthrough was real or the result of shared heat stroke and collective exhaustion. But to those who lived it, the memory is clear. The army spoke. The cats answered, and both understood. That night, under a sky wide and clear enough to swallow 10 empires, you walk the perimeter. There are no guards, just cats. You pass Bertrand the camel snoring, a sergeant snoozing under a woven blanket, 3 kittens curled up inside a helmet. You sit on a dune. A gray cat with a scarred ear climbs into your lap. You ask, "Do you remember France?" It purrs. You smile. "Yeah, me neither." Your dreams that night are strange, not nightmares. Exactly, more like soft, surreal memory mists, full of slow blinks and moonlit fur. You see a cat floating across a map, tail trailing stardust. Napoleon's voice echoes from nowhere, saying, "Their tactics are curl-based." A paw reaches out from a temple wall and gently taps your forehead. You wake with a start. There's a cat sitting on your chest. Not just a cat. Kevin, the one-eyed tabby, the first feline to challenge Bertrand the camel and emerge victorious. He's just staring, unblinking. You say, "Morning." He meows once, then leaps off and disappears into the early shadows. You follow, because of course you do. He leads you through the ruins, across the now familiar arches and sand-slick paths, until you reach a chamber no one has ever entered. At least, not on purpose. It's small, cool, perfectly round, and on its walls are dozens of inscriptions, paws, symbols, and above all, eyes, wide, calm, knowing. Kevin settles in the center and curls up. So, naturally, you sit. You don't know what's expected, so you breathe, softly, slowly. Eventually, you feel something shift, not the air, exactly, but the texture of the silence, like someone pulled a warm blanket across the world. You stay there for hours, minutes, hard to say. But when you leave, something is different. Back at camp, the mood has turned, not worse, just focused. Napoleon is consulting his maps again, but this time with Cleopatra sprawled across the central Nile region. He doesn't move her. Instead, he traces routes around her tail. "We leave soon," he says to no one in particular. You look around. Soldiers are packing, efficiently, quietly. A few smile. 1 or 2 hum the lullaby of the infinite nap, a tune recently popularized by the Loot Squad. The cats. They're everywhere. But they're watching now, not lounging, watching. And somehow, it's time. The departure is orderly, reverent. You help load the fish cart. It now carries offerings, a small statue of Dr. Biscuits, and one slightly melted wax bust of Cleopatra that no one will admit to sculpting. As the army begins to move, the cats follow. Some lead, some ride. Some walk just close enough to be seen and just far enough to remain mysterious. Locals come to wave. A few join the procession. One offers Napoleon a basket of kittens. He accepts them without hesitation, distributes them to officers based on vibe compatibility, and declares the day a holiday, the day of gentle reinforcements. As you march, the desert becomes less threatening. The sun, still relentless, is tempered by shared shade. The wind, less cruel, carries laughter and the occasional meow. You find yourself walking beside Antoine, who's scribbling in a tiny notebook labeled Advanced Meow Theory. He says, "Historians will never believe this." You nod. "They'll say we went mad." He grins. "Maybe we did, but it was the best kind of madness." That night, camp is quiet. No fires, just lanterns hung in a ring, glowing soft yellow. The cats sleep in circles, each surrounded by 1 or 2 devoted followers. It's not a cult. Not really. It's more like a mutual understanding between species that life is too short to ignore something as excellent as a warm nap in good company. You lie beside Kevin, who still refuses to acknowledge your existence most of the time. But tonight, he places one paw on your shoulder. You whisper, "Thanks, General." He sneezes. You take that as forgiveness. Suddenly, a shout, then silence, then laughter. Apparently, Bertrand the camel has stolen someone's boots again. Even the cats are amused. Paulian stands on a barrel and gives what is universally accepted as a speech. He does not meow. He just exists with such intensity that someone declares a truce between man and beast in the name of the great whisker of peace. Napoleon raises a glass of rose water and toasts. To guidance, to curiosity, says someone. Thonaps, says another. To them, you say, motioning toward the cats. No one argues. The stars blink quietly. The night is soft and infinite. And for the first time since arriving in Egypt, you no longer wonder what the end of the campaign will look like. You know, it looks like this. An army gently unwinding. A caravan of cats and humans moving as one. A general who no longer marches toward victory, but toward balance. And you, walking quietly beneath the stars, with sand in your boots, stories in your bones, and the knowledge that history real, living, purring history just curled up on your chest and went to sleep. You're deep in the desert now, not the harsh, heat-stricken kind where sand bites and thirst gnaws. This is different, softer. The wind carries the scent of wild mint and citrus. The dunes shimmer not with menace, but with invitation. It's not peace in the political sense. It's spiritual, meditative. You've entered a region that cartographers never bothered to name, because what would they even call it? The Empire of Cats, the District of Divine Purring, probably not something publishable in the French press. The cats seem to know the way. Each morning, they rise as one shake, stretch, and begin walking. No signal is given, no bugle, yet every soldier rises shortly after, rations packed, boots dusted, morale oddly excellent. One day, the cats lead you all to a narrow valley. At first glance, there's nothing there, just sand, wind-polished stones, and a single lonely palm. But as the wind shifts, it reveals something buried, an entrance cut into the rock, obscured by centuries of dust. It looks like a tomb, but it feels like a library. Inside, the air is dry and cool. You light a torch. What you see makes you stop walking mid-breath. There are murals, dozens of them. But these aren't just any murals. These are historical reconstructions. Each one shows humans following cats across the sands. Armies, scholars, families. Always a feline figure leading the way. Some cats are enormous, others impossibly delicate. One is painted floating above the ground, paws crossed in midair. You spot yourself in one mural. Okay, not you, but someone with your build, your nose, and your unfortunate tendency to trip over rugs. Marching behind a whiskered guide, Antoine appears beside you. Oh no, he breathes. We've entered myth. He's right. You're in a place that doesn't care if it's real or remembered. The cats brought you here not to find treasure, but to realize something. Napoleon arrives. For once, no drama, no speech. He simply removes his hat, bows, and sits beside the largest mural. One of a regal white cat touching foreheads with a kneeling pharaoh. Later that night, you learn that the valley is called Zaftau, an ancient name roughly translated as the Whispered Path. It was once a sanctuary for seekers, mystics, and probably a few very well-fed tabbies. The camp settles in. No one's in a hurry anymore. A group of officers forms the Poglyph Committee, charged with translating every wall in the valley. Antoine insists they start with the poem etched near the palm tree. It reads, "They followed stars, but we followed warmth. They mapped the wind, we mapped the nap. Where they ruled, we rested. And where we rested, they returned." Chills, literal chills. Someone carves it onto a shield and mounts it at the entrance. The days that follow are slow and golden. You eat fish, you sketch murals, you nap under the palm with 3 kittens and a half-retired lieutenant who now crochets cat booties for morale. The reflection chamber is re-established beside a spring. Pilgrims arrive from nearby villages, bringing gifts, milk, herbs, cushions. One even brings a small harp and plays lullabies that draw the cats like magnets. Napoleon hosts a symposium. The topic, "Are we still at war?" No one answers at first. Then Cleopatra yawns. Napoleon nods. Then we wait. You find yourself meditating, You, meditating, cross-legged on a flat rock while Kevin stares at you with what might be spiritual approval or mild hunger. Either way, you've never felt so centered. The cats begin to train the soldiers, sort of. One gray kitten insists on batting at a sergeant's laces until he perfects the art of moving silently. Another insists on standing in the middle of an officer's sword drill, forcing them to improvise around the cat forms. New fighting techniques are born. The pounce pivot, a last-minute dodge that involves dropping to the ground and rolling dramatically, ideally into a shady spot. The tail watch, using a companion's cat to judge wind direction based on fur flow. The sleep ambush, approaching from a full recline, rising only when needed. At least 2 of these are adopted into formal drills. Napoleon doesn't call them tactics. He calls them inspirations. Back in France, they'll probably be ridiculed. Here, they work. Then comes the moment. One morning, as dawn burns gently across the sand, the cats stop walking. All of them, at once. They sit, they stare toward the east. Quiet, still. Napoleon doesn't speak. No one does. You all just watch the sunrise, unsure of what will happen next. And in that stillness, perfect, sacred, fragile, you understand? You are done. Not defeated, not dismissed. Just complete. The mission, the march, the longing it's fulfilled, not with medals or territory, but with stillness, with surrender, not to an enemy, but to a truth. Cats don't conquer. They coexist. They adapt. They endure. They make their homes in temples, camps, and eventually, hearts. You return to camp and start packing. Not everything, not even most things. You leave behind weapons, armor, formal wear, 3 awkwardly sculpted statues, and your old journal, now filled with paw print annotations and 1 haiku. Dust and fur collide, purring against empire's edge. We blink and exhale. Napoleon is last to leave. He kneels beside a large ginger cat who's sprawled across a broken spear. He whispers something. The cat licks his hand. The procession back begins, not in defeat, in grace. The march home doesn't feel like a retreat. It feels like waking up slowly from a dream you didn't know you were dreaming, a soft, sleepy return from a place that changed you more than any victory ever could. The cats, predictably, walk ahead. Cleopatra, General Paulian, Dr. Biscuits, Kevin, and a dozen others you've come to know by name, voice, and preferred sleeping location. Each takes their position like it's the most natural thing in the world. Some ride on camels, some curl up in satchels, and one very determined tabby insists on walking only atop the brim of your hat. You don't argue. You've learned better. As you cross back through villages, the locals don't mock your procession. They greet it like an old friend returning. Children run beside the line, cats in their arms. Elders nod in recognition. One woman throws rose petals at Cleopatra's feet. The cat pretends not to care, but you swear her tail swishes a little higher. The French uniforms are dusty, torn, softened by sun and paw prints. Most soldiers now wear lightweight robes or piecemeal attire scavenged over the months. Your regiment looks more like a traveling troupe of philosopher nomads than a military unit. And somehow, that's exactly right. Each night, the camps are quieter, fires smaller, laughter more frequent. Someone reads poetry aloud, actual poetry, not just cat-themed limericks. A private named Jules has discovered a passion for watercolor. He paints cats reclining on thrones made of clouds. They're good, disturbingly good. There's less talk of France, less talk of home. Home, in many ways, has already happened. Somewhere between the first purring council and the temple of infinite scritches, you arrived. You're walking through the desert now, but you've never been more grounded. And then comes the battle. Not a real one, but the memory of one. Because one evening, camped just outside a windswept outpost, a dispatch arrives. A French courier, cheeks flushed, eyes wide, brings word from the distant war front. Hostilities resume, he says. Orders await. Reinforcements needed. Cairo is restless. The British are maneuvering. Everyone listens. No one reacts. Cleopatra yawns. Napoleon reads the letter, folds it, then looks to the cats. General Paulian is grooming his flank. Dr. Biscuits is asleep in the dish rack. Kevin licks his one remaining eye. Napoleon turns to the courier and says, "We'll consider it." The courier blinks. "Sir, we'll consider it." Napoleon repeats. That night, he calls a council. Everyone gathers under the stars. firelight flickering across sun-burnished faces. There's no agenda, just stories, tales of the temple, the sardine scandal, the camel standoff. Someone recalls the parade. Others mimic paw-based battle formations. Laughter circles like wind through trees. Even the cats seem to lean in, tails curled, listening. Finally, Napoleon stands. He's not in uniform. He wears a long tunic, sandals, and a sash Cleopatra slept on earlier that day. He looks every bit the wandering sage he accidentally became. "We left France chasing an empire," he says. "We found something else." He looks at you. "At first, I thought we were cursed. Now I think we were chosen." No one laughs. They understand. He gestures to the cats. "They taught us patience, awareness, selective aggression, excellent posture." A soft chuckle rolls through the group. France may call us back. War may rise again. But tonight, we rest. We listen. We honor. A pause. Then Cleopatra jumps into his arms, purring like a warm engine. It's the closest thing to applause he'll get. You sleep deeply that night. You dream of ships not the kind that conquer, but the kind that carry stories, floating across a moonlit sea, each with a single cat curled at the prow, guiding by starlight and intuition. You wake to the sound of packing. Real packing, not retreat, not panic, just readiness. The cats begin to cluster. You count them, all accounted for, even Kevin. Napoleon walks past you, nods. "To the coast," he says simply. The journey is calm, graceful. You pass fields, rivers, the edges of towns. You buy figs. You trade silk for fish. You stop to pet every cat you meet. And then, one morning, you see them. Sails on the horizon, French ships, lined up like waiting ghosts. Napoleon boards first, Cleopatra in one arm, Dr. Biscuits in a basket. The sailors don't ask questions. They've heard. You follow with Kevin in your hood, and Jules the painter lugging a crate marked important statues and not my feelings. As the ship departs, you stand at the stern and look back. The shore fades. The temples vanish. But the feeling remains. It's in your spine. Your breath, the tiny fur ball snoring in your pocket. You turn toward the sea, eyes soft. The wind gentle against your cheeks. A meow sounds from above. General Polyan is on the mast, watching, always. And you know, this story, your story is not one of conquest, but of connection. Not of flags planted, but of heads bowed. Not of territory gained, but of hearts opened. You smile. The cats, it turns out, never needed your protection. You needed theirs. The voyage home is a slow lullaby, sung by the waves, scored by distant gulls, and occasionally interrupted by a cat yowling because someone dared to move a blanket. You're on deck most days, not because of duty, but because below deck is now the feline meditation chamber, and unless you have the appropriate clearance or are carrying fresh sardines, you are strongly discouraged from entering. A sign hangs on the stairwell. Do not disturb the oracle unless your issue cannot wait until the next nap cycle. You obey it without hesitation. Napoleon spends his mornings pacing, but it's not his usual dramatic, restless pacing. It's softer now, thoughtful. Cleopatra rides on his shoulder like an accessory blessed by the gods of fashion and grace. She occasionally swats at his curls when he gets too intense. General Polyan has taken up residence in the crow's nest. You're fairly certain the lookouts are consulting him for weather predictions now. When his tail points due west, they alter course. No one questions this anymore. One afternoon, you find yourself sketching, not battles or temples, but moments, little scenes from the campaign that, until now, lived only in memory. A cat curled up in the shadow of the Sphinx. A soldier holding out his helmet like an offering, only to have it politely ignored. Antoine asleep mid-sentence with a paw print across his translation scroll. Bertrand the camel, now apparently retired, with a cat sleeping squarely between his ears. You title the page, Quiet Victories. The other soldiers spend the trip much the same way. Some carve small statues out of driftwood, every single one a cat. Others write letters they may never send, journals filled with insights like sunlight and purring cure. Most forms of discontent. Someone composes a sea shanty. It's entirely about the proper etiquette for being ignored by a cat with grace. It slaps. By the time land is in sight, the crew has unanimously agreed that no official debriefing will include the words religious epiphany or sardine cult. Not because they're ashamed, on the contrary, but because explaining it would ruin the magic. The ship docks. A small crowd waits. There are generals, ministers, probably someone's aunt. They're ready to hear tales of glory, of conquest, of empire. Napoleon steps forward, hut in hand, coat slightly singed on the hem where Paulion once napped. They ask him, "What did you find in Egypt?" He answers, "Balance." You see their faces twitch, struggling to file that under any known form of military success. He says nothing more. He doesn't need to. You all disembark quietly, cats included. Kevin leaps off your shoulder and disappears into the city with the ease of a creature who belongs everywhere. You don't call after him. He knows where to find you. Each soldier returns to their own corner of France. The army disperses like dust from a sunbeam, but no one is the same. One opens a bakery. Cats eat for free. Another becomes a schoolteacher, using stories of General Paulion to teach diplomacy and boundary setting. Antoine finishes his magnum opus, The Purr and the Power, a linguistic journey into meows and meaning. It becomes a cult classic. You write, not history, not war, but memory. You title it simply, Why Napoleon's Army Got Distracted by Egyptian Cats. You do not explain. You remember, because the real story isn't about tactics or dates or empire. It's about the moment a general paused for a meow, the time a kitten stopped a cavalry charge by sitting in a puddle, the laughter that bloomed in a forgotten shrine, the dreams stitched softly into the seams of silence. It's about how you fell asleep in the sand, surrounded by paw prints in peace, and woke up human again. Now, let yourself settle. You've walked far, through shifting dunes and quiet temples, past battles forgotten and memories that whisper even when no one listens. You've followed the flick of a tail and the twitch of a nose into places that can't be mapped, only felt. Breathe in slowly, as if the night itself has paused for you. Let the memory of warm stone beneath your back cradle you again. The gentle hum of purring close by, soft fur brushing against your wrist. Let your mind drift, not to battles or questions, but to the warmth of a shared sunbeam, to the moment before sleep when everything feels like it's exactly where it belongs. You are safe now. You are far from noise. The ships are docked, the banners are folded, and the cats are curled in corners of your heart. You didn't know needed softening. Remember the silence of that final campfire, the echo of stories traded beneath the stars, the last slow blink of a cat who saw through all your armor and approved anyway. There's no need to follow anymore. You've arrived. You're home. So close your eyes. Let the gentle rhythm of waves and whispers carry you. You did well. Sleep, dear traveler. Sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.